Hi everyone, welcome back. If you're seeking calm, deep rest, and peaceful sleep, you're in the right place. Let's begin.
You've been told that speaking up, proving yourself, and fighting for attention is the way to be seen, to be valued, to be happy. But if that were true, why do so many people who shout the loudest still feel unheard? Why do you, even after all the noise, still feel drained, misunderstood, and restless inside? The truth is, peace doesn't come from saying more, doing more, or chasing more. It comes from silence, from the quiet moments where you stop trying to control the world and begin to listen to yourself, to life, to the stillness within. Buddhism has whispered this secret for centuries, that when you turn inward, when you stop running after approval and simply sit with yourself, something extraordinary happens. The chaos outside loses its grip, the doubts in your mind begin to dissolve, and life, almost magically, starts to fall into place. Tonight, as you hear these words, you'll feel it. The noise in your head will soften, your chest will feel lighter, a calm clarity will rise in you, the kind you thought only monks or sages could touch. And when you wake tomorrow, you'll see differently, less desperate, more steady, unshaken by what used to disturb you. This isn't just another lesson, this is an invitation, an opening to a new way of being stronger, freer, aligned with something deeper than words. Are you ready to step into that silence? Let's begin. Silence is often mistaken for weakness, for giving up, for letting the world trample over you. But that's a lie. Real silence, the kind that comes from inner strength and not from fear, is one of the most powerful forces you can ever discover. It is not about retreating in shame. It is about refusing to feed the fire that burns you. When you stay still instead of rushing into arguments, when you refuse to meet aggression with more aggression, something shifts. A different kind of strength rises inside you, the strength of non-resistance. And this strength does not shout. It does not need to. It dissolves conflict without effort, leaving you lighter, calmer, and far more in control than any loud reaction could ever make you. When people try to draw you into their chaos, they thrive on your response. Anger feeds anger, just as fire spreads with fuel. But when you do not resist, when you choose silence, the cycle breaks. Suddenly, the energy they expected to keep burning dies out. The loudness falls flat. The conflict shrinks into nothing, not because you lost, but because you refused to play the game. This is the silent power of non-resistance. It does not destroy the other person, it transforms you. It turns an external storm into inner balance. Think about the way water behaves when faced with force. Strike it with your hand, and it does not resist. It simply moves aside, returning to stillness the moment you withdraw. It cannot be cut, cannot be held down, cannot be destroyed by a sword. Yet over time, it shapes mountains, carves valleys, and wears away stone. This is the model of true power, yielding without collapsing, allowing without surrendering your essence. Buddhism teaches this not as passivity but as wisdom. To resist everything is to exhaust yourself against forces you cannot control. To stop resisting is to discover a freedom that cannot be stolen. In the noise of daily life, you may find yourself pulled into endless battles, small arguments, subtle competitions, unspoken rivalries. At work, someone criticizes you unfairly. At home, a loved one lashes out in frustration. Online, strangers pour anger into comments. Every instinct pushes you to defend, to justify, to retaliate. But what does that really give you? For a moment, maybe it feels good to strike back. Yet afterwards, you are left tense, disturbed, drained of energy. Conflict always leaves scars, even if you win. Silence, on the other hand, leaves space for your mind to stay light. It does not chain you to the emotions of others. This does not mean you never speak, never act, never stand up for yourself. Non-resistance is not about accepting injustice or living without boundaries. It is about choosing the ground you fight on. It is about seeing that many battles are traps for your energy, distractions from what truly matters. By staying silent in the right moments, you allow the storm to pass, and in that passing, you remain untouched. You learn to step out of the endless cycle of reaction. This is how inner balance begins. There is a story in Zen about a man who was insulted in front of others. Instead of defending himself, he simply smiled and said nothing. His silence was so unsettling that the insulter grew embarrassed and left. The audience who witnessed it understood. The man who stayed silent was the strongest one in the room. Why? Because he refused to let another person control his state of mind. That is the essence of non-resistance. It is not about letting others dominate you. It is about refusing to hand them the keys to your inner world. When silence becomes your response, you step into a different kind of clarity. The mind is no longer clouded by the heat of quick emotions. In that space, you can see more clearly what is worth your energy, what is simply noise, what lessons are hidden in the situation. Sometimes the most transformative moment is not when you reply with the perfect comeback, but when you stay silent and discover you did not need one at all. In Buddhist thought, resistance is the birthplace of suffering. To resist reality is to argue with what already exists. If someone insults you, that event has already happened. If a challenge rises, it is already present. To resist it is to double your suffering. You now feel the pain of the event and the pain of your refusal to accept it. Non-resistance, through silence, removes that second wound. It allows you to meet reality as it is, not as you wish it to be. That meeting creates balance. You are no longer fighting the river, you are flowing with it, even as you steer your path gently forward. But here is the deeper secret. When you choose silence, you are not only protecting yourself from unnecessary conflict, you are creating space for transformation in the other person. Without your resistance, they are left with their own reflection. Their words echo back to them, their anger bounces against emptiness. Often, they begin to see their own actions more clearly, because you did not cloud it with your reaction. In this way, your silence becomes a mirror, showing them what they could not see while caught up in noise. This approach requires courage. It is far easier to fight back, to shout, to prove your point. It is harder to sit still with the heat rising inside you, to feel the urge to react and let it pass. Yet this is where your strength grows. Each time you choose non-resistance, your mind grows steadier, your heart stronger. Over time, you no longer fear conflict, because you know it cannot touch you unless you let it in. The modern world glorifies constant reaction. Social media thrives on outrage, arguments, and endless cycles of resistance. But what if you stopped feeding that cycle? What if, instead of defending every opinion, you chose silence? You would not only save your peace of mind, you would also step out of the trap of endless distraction. You would reclaim your focus, your time, your energy. This is not withdrawal, it is liberation. Non-resistance also teaches you the value of timing. Sometimes the best way to act is to first not act. When you stay silent, you give yourself the gift of space. In that space, emotions settle, clarity rises, wisdom speaks. Then, if you choose to respond, your words are no longer weapons of impulse but tools of truth. A single calm sentence, spoken after silence, carries more weight than 1,000 rushed arguments. It is not about never speaking, it is about speaking from stillness instead of chaos. Consider how often regret is born from words spoken in haste, a sharp reply in anger, a defensive comment made without thought. These words cannot be taken back once released. Silence, however, never needs apology. You will never regret not shouting. You will never regret not fueling another's fire. By choosing silence first, you create space to ensure that whatever words you eventually offer will be clean, kind, and true. There is a reason Buddhist monks take vows of noble silence during practice. It is not simply about avoiding speech, it is about discovering the power that lies underneath it. In silence, the mind turns inward, the ego loosens, the heart opens. When you practice silence in daily life, even in small ways, you touch that same energy. You begin to see that most of what you thought needed defending does not matter. Your dignity is not in how loudly you argue, it is in how calmly you hold yourself. When you no longer resist every insult, every misunderstanding, every challenge, you discover a kind of freedom that feels almost unshakable. It is as if the world still moves around you, storms still come, but at the center of it all, there is a still point, a quiet flame that does not flicker. That flame is your awareness, untouched by the noise. It is always there, waiting for you to return to it. Silence is the doorway back. And from that doorway, a new kind of life begins to unfold. A life where conflict no longer controls you. A life where peace is not something you chase outside, but something that grows naturally inside. A life where everything that once seemed urgent and loud begins to fall into place, simply because you stopped resisting and started listening. When you discover the quiet strength of non-resistance, you begin to notice something deeper rising inside you. The silence you choose in the outer world does not just dissolve conflict with others, it opens a door to a hidden world within yourself. In that stillness, when the noise of arguments and defenses fade away, what is left is your own mind echoing back to you. The thoughts you often drown out with distractions, the emotions you bury under endless reactions, the patterns you never pause to observe, they all surface when you are silent. This is where the real journey begins. Listening to the echo of your own mind is not the same as thinking harder. Thinking is what keeps most people trapped. They move from one thought to the next, pulled into loops of judgment, regret, and worry. True listening is different. It means stepping back far enough to notice the voice within you without rushing to agree with it or fight it. It is allowing thoughts to rise like clouds in the sky and simply watching them pass. In this space, you begin to see the truth of what is really happening in you. Most of the time, people speak louder to avoid listening to themselves. They fill their day with noise, constant conversations, endless scrolling, music playing without pause because silence feels uncomfortable. Yet that discomfort is not from silence itself, it is from the unspoken truths rising in the mind. Silence does not create those truths, it only reveals them. And here is the secret. What you fear hearing is often the exact thing you need to face to free yourself. When you start listening inwardly, you may first hear restlessness. The mind may throw 1,000 thoughts at once, demanding attention. Memories of the past, worries about the future, regrets, judgments, small insecurities you thought you left behind. At first, it feels overwhelming. But if you stay with it, if you keep breathing and observing without resistance, a shift happens. You begin to see the pattern beneath the noise. Thoughts repeat themselves like echoes bouncing in a canyon. The same fear worded differently. The same insecurity showing up in multiple forms. The same old story replaying again and again. In Buddhist practice, this recognition is liberation. You begin to realize that your thoughts are not truth. They are patterns. They are echoes. They rise and fall, loud one moment, gone the next. The suffering comes not from the thought itself, but from clinging to it, resisting it, or mistaking it as who you are. By listening deeply, you begin to see the mind as it is, a stream of activity passing through, not the solid identity you once believed. This kind of listening takes courage, because silence can expose the very things you try hardest to avoid. It may reveal anger you never admitted to yourself. It may bring up grief you pushed away years ago. It may uncover desires you denied or fears you never named. But when you finally allow them to rise in silence, they begin to lose their grip. The mind no longer has to keep repeating them like a broken record. By listening, you release. There is a subtle but powerful practice in Buddhism called mindfulness of thought. It does not mean pushing thoughts away or holding on to them. It means noting their presence, acknowledging without judgment, and letting them go. For example, when a thought arises, "I am not good enough," instead of fighting it or sinking into it, you simply note self-criticism. When anger arises, you note anger. When worry arises, worry. This simple labeling creates space between you and the thought. You are no longer the prisoner of it. You are the witness, and the witness is always free. In this space of inner listening, another truth becomes clear. Much of what you carry in your mind is not even your own voice. Family, culture, society, media, layer after layer of conditioning lives in your thoughts. The doubts you feel may not come from your true self, but from years of repetition by others. The insecurities may be echoes of words someone once spoke to you. The pressure may be echoes of expectations you never chose. By listening closely, you can begin to separate what is truly yours from what has been planted in you. The silence reveals these voices not to punish you, but to set you free. When you hear them clearly, you can question them. Is this belief really mine? Does this story serve me? Do I need to keep carrying this thought? Most people live their entire lives without asking these questions because they are too busy running from silence. But if you stay, if you keep listening, the answers start to rise naturally, and with those answers comes a freedom that no one can give you from the outside. Silence is not empty, it is full of truth. When you stop speaking and simply observe, you begin to notice the subtler movements of the mind, the tiny judgments you pass without realizing, the way your thoughts race ahead while your body stays in the present, the way you rehearse conversations that have not happened or replay arguments long gone. All of this is revealed in silence. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. This awareness is the beginning of wisdom. Listening to your own mind also shows you how restless it really is. Many people believe they are calm until they sit in silence. Then they realize how quickly the mind jumps, how unwilling it is to stay still. This realization is humbling, but it is also powerful. Because once you see the restlessness, you can begin to train it. You can gently bring it back to the breath, to the present, to awareness. And slowly, like a wild horse being tamed, the mind begins to settle. The echo of your thoughts is not always negative. In silence, you also begin to hear creativity that was drowned out before. Ideas surface that you never noticed in the noise. Intuitions become clearer. Insights that felt blocked suddenly open. Silence is the soil where new growth happens because it gives your inner voice space to breathe. This is why many great thinkers, writers, and spiritual teachers valued solitude, not to escape the world, but to hear more deeply. There is a phrase in Zen, "Silence is the language of truth." Words can twist, justify, argue, and hide, but silence reveals. In silence, your mind shows you what it has been hiding beneath the surface. And when you are willing to look, you gain a power that cannot be shaken by others. You are no longer afraid of your own thoughts. You know them, you face them, you understand them. Over time, this practice changes your entire relationship with yourself. Instead of fearing silence, you begin to crave it. Instead of running from your mind, you turn toward it. And in doing so, you begin to discover layers of yourself that had always been waiting beneath the noise. Not the reactive, restless self that clings to every passing thought, but the deeper awareness that watches silently, patiently, without judgment. That awareness is who you truly are. When you learn to listen inwardly, the outer world also changes. You stop being so easily triggered by others because you understand the echoes in your own mind. You see anger not as truth but as a passing storm. You see fear not as reality but as an echo of the past. And this same compassion you give yourself extends outward. When you hear the echoes in your own mind, you begin to hear the echoes in others. You realize they too are trapped in loops of thought, in patterns they may not see, and instead of reacting to them with judgment, you respond with patience because you understand the struggle from within. Listening to the echo of your own mind is one of the most profound gifts silence can offer. It is not easy because it strips away the distractions and excuses. It forces you to face yourself fully, but it is through this honesty that you become free. Free from illusions, free from stories that no longer serve you, free from the constant noise that keeps so many restless. And once you have touched this freedom, you see that silence is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of truth. It is the space where you finally hear what has always been there, waiting for you to listen. And in that listening, the restless mind begins to soften, the weight begins to lift, and the clarity you have been chasing outside reveals itself within. As the echoes of the mind grow clearer in silence, something deeper begins to unfold. When you start to notice thoughts as patterns and not as truth, a new question naturally rises. If I can watch these thoughts come and go, then who is the I that is watching? This is where stillness takes you beyond self-reflection and into a far greater discovery, the slow dissolving of the ego. The silence you practice does not just calm the mind, it begins to dismantle the very illusion of identity that has kept you trapped in cycles of pride, fear, and suffering. The ego thrives on noise. It survives through constant reinforcement labels, achievements, comparisons, stories you repeat about yourself. In silence, these props begin to fade. When there is no audience to impress, no argument to win, no performance to uphold, the sense of I loses its usual grip. You begin to see that what you called me is not a solid thing at all. It is a collection of habits, roles, and passing states stitched together by thought. The quieter you become, the more this illusion is exposed. Buddhism teaches that clinging to the ego is the root of suffering. When you believe deeply in a fixed I, you naturally defend it against anything that threatens it. Criticism feels unbearable, loss feels like a personal wound, praise becomes addictive. Life becomes a constant battle to maintain an identity that is fragile by its very nature. Stillness interrupts this battle. When you sit in silence long enough, you notice that the I you defend is constantly changing. Thoughts shift, moods shift, even your sense of self shifts depending on who you are with or what you are doing. If it changes so often, can it truly be permanent? The practice of dissolving ego through stillness does not require force. You do not have to destroy the self or fight it. Instead, you simply watch it. Each time you observe your thoughts rising and falling, each time you notice your emotions appearing and fading, you begin to see that none of these are truly you. They belong to experience, not to identity. This gentle awareness is like sunlight on ice. Without violence, it melts what once seemed solid. Silence is especially powerful because it removes the distractions that normally keep the ego alive. When you are constantly talking, comparing, or defending yourself, you keep strengthening the story of I. But in silence, there is no need for a story. Without words, you cannot explain yourself, justify yourself, or exaggerate yourself. You are left with the raw presence of being, and in that presence, the ego has no place to stand. This is not emptiness in the negative sense. It is freedom. Without the constant burden of defending I, life feels lighter. When someone criticizes you, you no longer feel shattered, because you understand there is no fixed you to protect. When success comes, you enjoy it without clinging, because you know it does not define you. When loss happens, you grieve, but you do not collapse, because nothing can take away the awareness that lies beneath all change. Stillness also reveals how much of your suffering comes from taking thoughts personally. A thought arises, "I am not enough." Without awareness, you accept it as truth. With awareness, you see it as a temporary echo, not as a definition of who you are. This shift is subtle but profound. It is the difference between drowning in the river and standing safely on the bank, watching the water flow. The dissolution of ego is not about erasing individuality. Buddhism does not teach that you become nothing. It teaches that you discover you were never the small self you thought you were. Beyond the shifting layers of thought and identity, there is awareness itself, open, vast, unchanging. In stillness, you touch that awareness. It does not belong to you. It is you, in the truest sense, beyond all labels. Every moment of silence becomes an invitation to return to this truth. You start to notice how often the ego intrudes even in subtle ways. A desire to be praised, a small resentment when ignored, a hidden pride when others admire you. Instead of condemning these, you simply notice them. In noticing, you weaken their hold. Slowly, the grip of ego softens. This softening also transforms how you relate to others. When the I is no longer at the center, there is more space for compassion. You see that others, too, are trapped in their own illusions of self, suffering under the weight of pride, fear, and comparison. Instead of reacting to them, you feel patience. Instead of competing with them, you feel connection. Dissolving your ego does not isolate you, it unites you more deeply with the world around you. The Buddha compared the ego to a house built on unstable ground. No matter how much you reinforce it, cracks will appear. Stillness is like stepping outside of the house. At first, it feels unfamiliar. You may even feel exposed. But then you realize the sky above you is infinite, open, and cannot be taken away. You do not lose anything real by leaving the house of ego. You only lose the walls that kept you from freedom. There is also a quiet humility that comes with this realization. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth, because you see there was never a separate self to elevate in the first place. Achievements still matter, but they no longer define you. Failures still happen, but they no longer destroy you. You live with a kind of ease that others can feel, even if they cannot explain it. They sense the absence of ego in your presence, and it gives them space to breathe as well. The practice of dissolving ego through stillness is not a one-time event. It unfolds gradually, like peeling away layers of an onion. Each moment of silence shows you another layer. Sometimes it is painful, because the ego does not want to disappear. It clings, it fights, it tries to convince you it is essential. But each time you return to silence, you loosen its hold. Each time you let go of the need to defend or define yourself, you take another step into freedom. Over time, life itself becomes less heavy. You stop carrying so many labels: success, failure, victim, victor, good, bad. You live more lightly, because you see these were never truly you. And in that lightness, joy arises naturally, not the fleeting joy of achievement, but the steady joy of simply being. When the ego dissolves, even partially, the world appears different. Colors seem brighter, relationships feel less strained, moments that once felt ordinary take on new depth. Because without the filter of ego, you see reality more clearly. You see people as they are, not as mirrors for your own identity. You see events as they are, not as threats or validations of me. The silence that began as a refuge from conflict becomes something greater, a gateway to liberation. It is here that the Buddhist teaching of no self is no longer just a concept, but a lived experience. You understand directly that the I you defended for so long was never solid. You see through the illusion, and in that seeing, you are free. And from this freedom, everything begins to align in a way you could not force before. Decisions feel clearer because they are not clouded by ego. Relationships become easier because you are not entangled in proving yourself. Life flows more naturally because you are no longer resisting reality with the fragile armor of I. This is the gift of silence and stillness, not just peace, but the unraveling of the illusion that caused suffering in the first place. To sit quietly and turn inward is not to withdraw from life. It is to step into life more fully, without the distortion of ego. And when that happens, what once felt heavy becomes light, what once felt confusing becomes clear, and what once felt empty becomes complete. When the illusion of ego begins to fade through stillness, something even more profound comes into view. Without the constant noise of defending or proving yourself, silence becomes like a clear lake, reflecting everything back without distortion. In this clarity, you start to see not only your thoughts and emotions, but also the hidden consequences of the choices you've made. Every action, every word, every intention leaves behind a trace. In silence, those traces surface, showing you the fruits of your past more vividly than any spoken confession ever could. This is where silence reveals itself as a mirror of karma. Karma is not some mystical punishment waiting for you in another life. It is the natural unfolding of cause and effect in this very moment. What you do plants seeds, and those seeds ripen into experiences, sometimes immediately, sometimes years later. But most of the time, people move too quickly, talk too much, or distract themselves so heavily that they never notice the subtle ripening of those seeds. Silence strips away the distractions. When you are still, you feel the results of your past actions more clearly, both the harmony and the unrest they have created within you. In silence, you begin to recognize patterns. Perhaps you notice that when you sit quietly, a deep unease rises, an echo of choices made out of anger or selfishness. Or maybe a lightness surfaces, the fruit of kindness given freely in the past. Words can hide these patterns, excuses, justifications, endless explanations, but silence does not let you hide. It reflects everything back with brutal honesty and tender clarity at the same time. This reflection is not meant to condemn you. Buddhism teaches that karma is not about judgment, it is about learning. When silence reveals the weight of your past actions, it is offering you a chance to see the truth and choose differently moving forward. The discomfort you feel in stillness is not punishment, it is insight. It shows you the cost of certain choices, the way they echo long after the moment has passed. And once you see clearly, you have the power to change. For example, someone who constantly speaks harshly may never notice the damage they cause because they drown their conscience in more words. But when they practice silence, the mirror shows them the tension in their body, the restlessness in their mind, the subtle guilt that had been buried. This is karma ripening not as an external punishment, but as the natural fruit of their own actions. Silence brings it into awareness, so it can no longer be ignored. On the other hand, someone who has practiced generosity and kindness will find in silence a sense of ease. Their mind will rest more naturally, their heart will feel lighter. This too is karma, the sweet fruit of wholesome actions revealing itself in quiet moments. Words may not capture this peace, but silence makes it unmistakable. The mirror of karma is especially powerful because it reveals not just what you did, but the intention behind it. Two people may perform the same outward action, but with different motives, the karmic seeds they plant are completely different. In silence, you begin to notice the subtle intentions behind your choices. Were you giving to be seen as good, or to genuinely help? Were you speaking to uplift or to control? These subtleties are often missed in the rush of daily life, but silence makes them visible. Stillness also reveals how karma is not only individual, but also collective. When you sit quietly, you may notice how much of your restlessness is inherited patterns from family, culture, or community. Actions ripple across relationships and generations. The unspoken energy in a room carries the weight of countless past actions. Silence tunes you into these ripples. You begin to feel how deeply interconnected your life is with others, how no choice is truly isolated. This awareness transforms the way you live. When you see that every action leaves an imprint, you begin to choose more carefully. When silence shows you the fruits of anger, you hesitate before planting another seed of it. When silence reveals the peace that comes from kindness, you are inspired to nurture it more. Silence does not just reflect karma. It becomes the ground where wisdom grows, where you learn to act in ways that create harmony rather than suffering. The mirror of karma also humbles you. In daily life, it is easy to believe you can control appearances, that you can shape how others see you through words and gestures. But in silence, none of that matters. What rises within you is beyond performance. The unease, the peace, the restlessness, the clarity, they all reflect the truth of how you have lived, not the mask you have worn. This realization can be sobering, but it is also freeing. You no longer waste energy on appearances. You focus instead on genuine transformation, knowing that karma is written not in words but in the fabric of your being. Buddhist teachings often speak of mindfulness as the key to breaking the cycle of karma. By being fully present in your actions, you stop planting seeds blindly. Silence sharpens this mindfulness. It forces you to slow down, to feel the weight of your choices, to see clearly the direction they lead. Over time, you become less reactive, less careless, more intentional. And with intention comes freedom, the freedom to plant seeds of peace instead of suffering. One of the most striking things silence teaches about karma is impermanence. No matter how heavy the consequences of your past actions feel, they are not permanent. Karma ripens, it passes, it changes. Silence allows you to witness this process in real time. A painful memory may arise, bringing discomfort, but if you stay still, you notice it eventually fades. A joyful memory may bring warmth, but it too passes. The mirror shows you not only the results of your past, but also their impermanence, teaching you not to cling or despair. In this way, silence becomes both a teacher and a healer. It shows you the wounds left by past actions, but it also shows you they can heal. It shows you the pain of unskillful choices, but it also gives you the clarity to choose differently now. Each moment of silence is an opportunity to shift your karma, to plant new seeds with awareness instead of blindness. Over time, this practice reshapes your entire relationship with life. You stop seeing karma as something abstract or far away. You see it unfolding in your own body, mind, and relationships every day. The tension you feel is karma. The peace you feel is karma. The opportunities that open or close are karma. And by being silent enough to notice, you learn to live with greater care and wisdom. What makes silence such a powerful mirror is its honesty. Words can be twisted, stories can be rewritten, but the way you feel when you sit quietly cannot be faked. It is the direct reflection of how you have lived. Some days that reflection will be difficult to face. Other days it will be luminous. Both are necessary because both teach you. When you embrace silence as a mirror of karma, you stop fearing the truth of yourself. You understand that everything you see is simply cause and effect, and that each moment gives you a chance to plant something new. This removes the heaviness of guilt and the arrogance of pride. It leaves you with something far more valuable, the clarity to live consciously, to act with awareness, and to trust that the seeds you plant today will shape a more peaceful tomorrow. And from this clarity, a deeper stillness begins to form. You no longer run from silence, because you know it is the place where truth reveals itself. You no longer run from karma, because you see it not as punishment but as guidance. And as this understanding deepens, you begin to live with a balance that is unshaken by the past, unburdened by fear, and open to the freedom that silence continually offers. When silence becomes a mirror of karma, the truth of your past unfolds before you with clarity. You see how each choice has left an imprint, how every intention carries weight, how nothing disappears without consequence. This awareness is not meant to burden you, but to awaken you, to show you that the same law of cause and effect that shaped your restlessness can also shape your freedom. And it is here that presence reveals its secret power, the ability to turn agitation into calm, to refine anxiety into balance. What feels heavy and restless can be transformed not by escaping it, not by resisting it, but by meeting it fully in awareness. This is the alchemy of presence. Restlessness is one of the most common experiences in the modern mind. The constant pull of distractions, the endless stream of demands, the lingering unease of unresolved emotions, all create a background noise that never seems to stop. For many, silence feels unbearable at first because it exposes this restlessness. But Buddhism teaches that this exposure is a gift, not a curse. The very act of noticing your agitation is the first step in transforming it. What you bring into awareness begins to shift, while what you ignore only grows stronger. Presence is not about controlling the mind or forcing it to be still. It is about directing your attention fully into the moment, letting awareness settle where the body and breath already exist. The anxious mind wants to scatter into memories of the past, into fears of the future, into endless mental rehearsals. Presence calls it back home. Each time you return to the sensation of breath, each time you anchor your awareness in the now, you are performing a subtle alchemy. You are turning the lead of restlessness into the gold of stillness. This process begins with recognition. Anxiety often feels overwhelming because we mistake it for reality itself. We feel restless and believe something outside must be wrong, that something must be solved immediately. But when you rest in presence, you begin to see restlessness as simply a state of the mind. It is not permanent, it is not identity, it is not truth. It is a passing condition that arises and falls like waves. This shift in perspective loosens its grip immediately. The body becomes an important doorway in this alchemy. Restlessness lives in physical sensations, a tight chest, a shallow breath, a nervous twitch in the hands. By bringing awareness directly to these sensations without judgment, you stop fueling them with more stories. Instead of thinking, "I am anxious," you notice tightness in the chest, warmth in the face, quickened breath. This language of observation interrupts the cycle of identification. You are no longer lost in the restlessness. You are watching it. And in that watching, it begins to soften. Presence is also about patience. Anxiety feeds on urgency, on the belief that everything must be solved immediately. When you sit in awareness, you teach the mind a different rhythm. You show yourself that not every discomfort requires immediate reaction. Some storms pass on their own when you do not chase them. This patience is not passive, it is active training of the heart to remain steady in the face of unease. Each time you stay present with discomfort, you strengthen your capacity for equanimity. Equanimity is the natural fruit of presence. It is the quality of being balanced, steady, and unshaken, no matter what arises. It does not mean you feel nothing, it means you are not controlled by what you feel. Presence trains this quality because it roots you in something deeper than thought or sensation. It roots you in awareness itself. From that ground, emotions may rise and fall, but they do not knock you over. Anxiety may still appear, but it no longer defines you. Restlessness may still surface, but it no longer drags you away. This alchemy also reveals the subtle layers of restlessness that often go unnoticed. Not all anxiety shows up as panic or fear. Sometimes it appears as impatience, boredom, or the constant need to move on to the next thing. In silence, these subtle forms become visible. You notice the urge to pick up your phone for no reason, the discomfort of simply sitting with yourself, the impulse to fill every gap with noise or activity. Each of these is restlessness in disguise. By bringing them into awareness, you begin to dismantle them piece by piece. Breath becomes a powerful ally in this process. Unlike thoughts, the breath is always here, always moving, always offering a rhythm that connects body and mind. When restlessness arises, returning to the breath is like returning to a stable anchor in the middle of a storm. You do not need to control it, only observe it rising, falling, expanding, softening. As the breath steadies, the mind often follows. Presence through breath is one of the simplest yet most profound ways to transmute anxiety into calm. The practice of presence also challenges the habit of escape. Many people cope with restlessness by running from it through distraction, consumption, or constant activity. But escape never resolves the root, it only postpones it. In silence, you learn the courage to stay. To sit with the discomfort long enough to see that it is not permanent, long enough to realize that you are larger than the restlessness itself. This realization is transformative. It shifts you from being a victim of anxiety to being a witness of it, and eventually a master over it. Stillness does not mean the absence of movement, but the presence of balance. A lake can hold ripples and yet remain still in its essence. In the same way, your mind can hold passing thoughts and emotions while your awareness remains steady beneath them. This is the essence of equanimity, an inner stillness that is not destroyed by the activity of life. And it is cultivated not through escape, but through full presence. Over time, this practice begins to change your daily life in subtle but powerful ways. The conversations that once left you anxious no longer disturb you as deeply. The tasks that once felt overwhelming become manageable because you meet them one moment at a time instead of drowning in the weight of them all at once. The future that once filled you with fear loses its grip because you no longer live in it. You live here, now, where fear has no fuel. Presence also deepens your connection with others. Anxiety often creates a wall between you and the people around you, pulling you into your own racing mind. But when you are present, you listen more deeply. You see others more clearly. You respond with patience rather than reactivity. This shift not only transforms your own restlessness, but also softens the restlessness in those around you. Presence is contagious. Your calm becomes a quiet invitation for others to settle as well. The alchemy of presence is not dramatic or loud. It works slowly, like a gentle flame that transforms metal into something new. Each moment you return to awareness, you are reshaping your relationship with the mind. Each time you choose to stay rather than escape, you are transmuting anxiety into equanimity. Over days, months, and years, this transformation becomes profound. The restless person you once were fades, replaced by a steadiness that feels unshakable. This is why stillness is not passive, but deeply active. It is the work of refining the mind, of training the heart, of cultivating the kind of presence that transforms every experience. Restlessness is not an enemy, it is raw material. Anxiety is not a curse, it is the substance that, when met with awareness, becomes the foundation for equanimity. The alchemy is already within you. Silence simply gives it the space to unfold. And as this unfolding deepens, you realize that peace was never something to chase outside. It was always here, waiting beneath the layers of restlessness. All it needed was the fire of presence, steady and patient, to turn unease into balance and anxiety into calm clarity. This is the quiet miracle of silence. It takes what feels unbearable and transforms it into the very strength you have been seeking all along. When presence turns restlessness into stillness, you begin to experience a balance that feels steady even in the middle of chaos. But this balance is fragile if your words continue to flow without care. What you say can either preserve the stillness you've cultivated or shatter it in an instant. And this is why the next step in deepening silence is not only about listening inwardly, but also about guarding what leaves your mouth. Buddhism calls this practice right speech. And it is not just about what you say, but equally about what you choose not to say. There is a hidden discipline in restraint, a strength in withholding, a wisdom in silence that carries more power than endless words ever could. Speech is one of the most underestimated forces in human life. Words can heal, but they can also wound so deeply that the scars last a lifetime. They can unite people, but they can also tear relationships apart. The Buddha taught that unskillful speech is one of the most common ways we create suffering, both for ourselves and others. Gossip, lies, harsh words, careless chatter, all of these plant seeds that eventually ripen into unrest. And often, we do not even realize the weight of our words until silence confronts us with their echoes. The discipline of speech restraint is not about never speaking. It is about understanding the cost of every word and learning to release only those that are necessary, kind, and true. Most people speak to fill silence, to defend themselves, or to assert their ego. But when you are rooted in stillness, you no longer need constant words to feel secure. You begin to see that many conversations serve only to drain energy or create conflict. By choosing silence in those moments, you preserve both your peace and the dignity of others. There is a power in withholding that few understand until they practice it, to hear criticism and not immediately respond, to listen to gossip and not pass it on, to witness conflict and not add more fuel with your own words. This kind of restraint may look passive, but in truth it requires great strength. The impulse to speak is strong, and it is fed by pride, fear, and habit. To hold back, to wait, to let silence carry the moment, instead of words, this is a discipline that sharpens both awareness and compassion. Right speech has 4 essential qualities. It avoids lies, avoids divisive talk, avoids harsh words, and avoids idle chatter. Each of these forms of restraint frees you in ways you cannot see until you practice. Lying, even in small ways, burdens the mind with the need to maintain falsehood. Silence frees you from this burden. Divisive speech may feel satisfying in the moment, but it creates walls that isolate you from others. Silence allows those walls to crumble. Harsh words may release your anger briefly, but they leave wounds in others that return to haunt you later. Silence preserves dignity, and idle chatter, though seemingly harmless, scatters the mind and weakens presence. Silence strengthens it. The deeper you go into silence, the more sensitive you become to the energy behind speech. You start to feel how words can be heavy or light, sharp or soft, nourishing or toxic. You begin to see that speech is not neutral, it always carries intention. When the intention is ego-driven, words carry restlessness with them. When the intention is rooted in awareness, words carry stillness. This is why restraint is so important. It keeps you from releasing energy that does not align with your deeper clarity. Silence in this sense is not emptiness, but a container of strength. It gives space for others to reveal themselves without interruption. It gives space for truth to arise without distortion. It gives space for wisdom to replace the impulse of reaction. Many conflicts in life are fueled not by what happened, but by what was said afterwards. Restraint prevents you from pouring oil on flames that could otherwise burn out on their own. This discipline also teaches humility. It reveals how often we use words to project knowledge we do not truly have, or to shape an image of ourselves we want others to believe. In silence, these impulses are exposed. You realize how much of speech is unnecessary performance. By letting go of that performance, you begin to live more authentically, no longer bound to the pressure of always having something to say. At the same time, restraint makes your words more meaningful. When you do speak, people listen more deeply because they sense the weight of your silence behind your speech. A few words spoken with mindfulness carry more influence than 1,000 words poured out without care. Silence refines your voice, turning it into a tool of clarity instead of a habit of distraction. There is also compassion hidden in this practice. By withholding words in moments of tension, you give others the space to calm themselves. By not rushing to correct, argue, or dominate, you create an environment where others feel less attacked. Silence allows kindness to breathe in spaces where words would only choke it. In this way, restraint becomes an act of service, a quiet offering of peace to the world around you. The discipline of speech restraint is challenging because it confronts deeply ingrained habits. Many people fear silence in conversation because they think it signals weakness or ignorance. But in truth, silence often signals wisdom. It shows that you are not controlled by impulse, that you are comfortable resting in presence without needing to assert yourself. Over time, this changes not only how others see you, but how you see yourself. You no longer define your worth by how much you speak, but by the quality of awareness you bring to each moment. The Buddha himself often taught through silence. When asked questions that came from ignorance or malice, he would remain quiet. That silence was not avoidance, but teaching, showing that not every question deserves an answer, not every challenge deserves a defense. Sometimes the greatest lesson you can give is to let words dissolve into stillness, forcing the listener to face themselves. Practicing restraint does not mean you retreat from life. It means you participate more wisely. You speak when it serves truth, when it uplifts, when it clarifies, when it is necessary. And when it does not, you allow silence to be the answer. Over time, this shapes a new rhythm of living. Conversations become lighter, relationships become deeper, conflicts become fewer, because the energy you release into the world through words is aligned with awareness, not with ego. This hidden discipline is a form of freedom. Without it, you are bound by every impulse to speak, every urge to respond, every habit of filling space with sound. With it, you are free to choose, free to preserve your peace, free to let silence speak when words would only harm, free to shape speech into something sacred rather than careless. As you live more deeply in this way, you begin to understand why Buddhism places so much emphasis on right speech. It is not just about morality, it is about liberation. Each restrained word is a moment of release from ego. Each silence is a return to presence. Each careful choice of speech is a seed of clarity that shapes the karma of your future. And in this way, speech restraint becomes not just discipline, but wisdom in action, a bridge between silence and truth that allows you to live with balance, compassion, and dignity. When the discipline of speech restraint begins to take root, a new clarity unfolds. You begin to see how much harm can be prevented by holding back words that do not serve truth or kindness. But silence is not only about what you withhold from the world, it is also about what you cultivate within yourself. The stillness you protect in your own mind becomes more than personal relief. It becomes a gift to others. This is where the deeper lesson reveals itself. That focusing on yourself, tending to your own inner state, is not selfishness, but compassion in its highest form. Most people are taught to place others first, to sacrifice endlessly, to pour themselves out until nothing is left. While generosity is noble, without inner balance, it often turns into resentment, exhaustion, or subtle forms of control. Buddhism teaches that true compassion begins at home, within the quiet tending of one's own mind. When your inner world is clouded with anger, fear, or endless agitation, what you give to others carries that same energy. But when your inner world is calm, steady, and rooted in silence, your presence itself becomes medicine for those around you. The mind is not an isolated organ. It radiates into every interaction, every conversation, every relationship. Walk into a room full of tension, and you will feel it immediately, even if no one speaks. This is the silent exchange of energy that takes place between people. If your own mind is restless, you add restlessness to the collective. If your mind is steady, you add steadiness. In this sense, working on your inner state is one of the greatest contributions you can make to the world. Silence becomes compassion when it stops you from adding more noise to a noisy world. Each moment you choose to return inward rather than spill your unprocessed emotions outward, you reduce the burden of suffering around you. It may not look dramatic from the outside, no speeches, no heroic gestures, but its impact is profound. A calm person in the midst of conflict stabilizes everyone nearby. A peaceful presence can lower the tension of an entire room without saying a word. This is why tending to your own silence is not withdrawal but service. It prevents harm before it begins. It turns you into a mirror where others can see their own agitation reflected more clearly. And often, without you saying anything, your steadiness invites them to soften as well. This is compassion in its purest form, helping others not through force or control but through the quiet influence of your own being. Caring for your own mind also ensures that the compassion you offer is sustainable. Without inner work, acts of service often carry hidden motives, seeking approval, avoiding guilt, proving worth. Over time, this drains both you and those you try to help. But when your mind is clear and your heart is balanced, your compassion flows naturally, without demand, without needing anything in return. It becomes as effortless as breathing, because it rises from a place of fullness rather than lack. The Buddha often compared the mind to a garden. If you neglect it, weeds of anger, greed, and delusion grow wild, choking everything. If you tend it carefully, seeds of kindness, patience, and wisdom flourish. To focus on yourself is to garden your own mind, to create fertile soil where wholesome qualities can grow. And just as a well-kept garden nourishes not only the gardener, but also anyone who visits, a well-tended mind nourishes everyone it touches. This practice is not about shutting yourself off from the world, but about refining what you bring into it. Think of how a polluted river poisons every field it waters, while a clean river brings life to everything it touches. Your mind is like that river. When you cleanse it through silence and self-focus, your presence feeds others with peace instead of pollution. Another aspect of this practice is honesty. When you turn inward in silence, you begin to see your own hidden motives, your own subtle patterns of pride or fear. This self-awareness prevents you from projecting them onto others. It is common for people to help outwardly while unconsciously pushing their own unresolved pain onto those they try to serve. By tending to your own mind first, you reduce this projection. You help from a place of clarity, not from hidden wounds. This makes your compassion purer and more trustworthy. Self-focus also protects others from your unprocessed emotions. How often do arguments escalate not because of what was said, but because one person dumped their inner chaos onto another? When you practice silence, you learn to sit with your emotions, to process them inwardly rather than spilling them outwardly. This creates a buffer of kindness for others. They are spared from carrying what you have not yet understood yourself. That restraint is compassion, even if it looks like nothing from the outside. Tending to your own mind is also the most effective way to teach. Words alone rarely convince others to change. People learn more from the energy you embody than from the advice you give. A person who speaks of peace but radiates restlessness will not inspire anyone. A person who says little but radiates calm can change lives without effort. When you embody the silence you cultivate, you become a living example. This is teaching through presence, which often carries more weight than teaching through speech. In modern culture, where productivity and performance are glorified, self-focus is often misunderstood as indulgence. But Buddhism reframes it. Caring for your mind is not a retreat from responsibility, but the foundation of it. Without inner clarity, your actions are clouded. With inner clarity, your actions become aligned with wisdom. The more you stabilize yourself, the more you are able to act skillfully in the world, whether as a parent, a partner, a leader, or a friend. The ripple effect of inner silence cannot be overstated. A calm parent raises children in an atmosphere of safety instead of fear. A balanced leader makes decisions that avoid unnecessary harm. A peaceful individual in a community diffuses conflict simply by being present. None of these require dramatic speeches or constant action. They require inner tending, the steady work of self-focus that creates outer harmony. At its core, self-focus is compassion because it acknowledges interdependence. You are not separate from the world, you are part of it. Your inner state contributes to the collective energy, just as every drop contributes to the ocean. By calming your drop, you calm the ocean. By purifying your drop, you purify the ocean. What you do inwardly is never just for you. Silence teaches this truth in the simplest way. When you sit in stillness, you realize that your mind does not exist in isolation. The energy within you resonates outward. Others feel it, even without words. The more you cultivate silence, the more you contribute to a world that is desperate for calm, clarity, and compassion. So tending to your own mind is not selfishness, it is service. It is the quiet, unseen work that prevents harm, nourishes peace, and allows compassion to flow naturally into every corner of your life. And when enough individuals choose this path, the collective energy shifts. The world becomes less restless, less hostile, more balanced, because its people have chosen to start with themselves. When you begin to understand that self-focus is an act of compassion, a quiet service that radiates peace into the lives of others, a new truth becomes unavoidable. The world you live in is not built to support that silence. Everywhere you turn there is noise, voices competing for attention, devices demanding your time, information flooding your senses from every angle. This culture of distraction does not encourage stillness, it resists it. And so, when you choose silence in such a world, you are not merely stepping away from noise, you are rebelling against an entire system designed to keep you restless. Noise is not just sound, it is the endless barrage of stimulation that keeps you running without pause. The scrolling of screens, the constant buzz of notifications, the chatter of advertisements, the pressure to always respond and perform. The modern environment thrives on pulling your attention outward until nothing is left for your inner life. In this context, choosing silence is not passive, it is a radical act. It is saying no to a culture that profits from your distraction and yes to a life where your attention belongs to you again. Silence disrupts the cycle of consumption. In stillness, you are not feeding the endless appetite of media, not buying into the constant push of comparison, not fueling the machinery of distraction. You step out of the game entirely, and in doing so, you reclaim something priceless, your autonomy. The greatest rebellion in a world that wants you distracted is to be fully present, fully aware, fully in control of your own mind. This rebellion is subtle but powerful. It does not require marching in the streets or shouting slogans. It happens in the quiet moments when you turn off the noise and sit with yourself. It happens when you resist the urge to check your phone for the 100th time and instead notice your breath. It happens when you walk without earbuds, eat without screens, listen without planning your reply. Each of these choices is an act of liberation from a culture that wants to colonize your attention. The cost of noise is rarely acknowledged, but silence makes it undeniable. Constant distraction fragments the mind, leaving you restless, anxious, and disconnected from yourself. Silence reveals this fragmentation with startling clarity. At first, the quiet may feel unbearable, because you finally hear the inner chaos that noise has been covering. But in staying with it, you begin to reclaim the wholeness you had forgotten. This reclamation is radical because it undermines the very forces that thrive on your disconnection. To be silent in a noisy world is to refuse conformity. The culture around you equates loudness with strength, constant expression with relevance, and endless stimulation with success. But silence rejects these illusions. It shows you that strength does not need volume, relevance does not require constant broadcasting, and fulfillment is not found in endless consumption. By living these truths, you challenge the foundations of a society built on distraction. Silence is also rebellion because it cannot be commodified. You cannot buy stillness, you cannot sell presence, you cannot package awareness into endless upgrades. It is freely available to anyone willing to pause. In a world where nearly everything is turned into a product, silence remains untouchable. By choosing it, you step outside the logic of consumerism and into a freedom that money cannot buy. This rebellion is not against others, but against the conditioning that has kept you from yourself. It is against the lie that your worth depends on productivity, against the illusion that you are only valuable when you are visible, against the fear that you must always be moving to matter. Silence exposes these illusions for what they are. It shows you that worth is inherent, that presence is enough, that stillness is not emptiness but fullness of being. The practice of quiet self-focus challenges the modern obsession with constant communication. In a world where everyone is always talking, posting, and sharing, choosing not to participate feels countercultural. Yet this restraint is not isolation, it is sovereignty. It is reclaiming your right to exist without performing. It is freeing yourself from the exhausting demand to always be on. That freedom is revolutionary because it returns your life to you. Silence also becomes a mirror for others. When you choose stillness, people notice. They may not understand it, but they feel the difference. In your calm presence, they sense something they have lost. Your refusal to join the noise becomes a silent invitation for them to question their own distractions. This ripple effect is how quiet rebellion spreads, not by force, but by example. There is courage in this choice. Noise is easy, silence is confronting. Distraction numbs, presence exposes. To turn inward requires facing the discomfort that others avoid. It requires strength to resist the pull of constant stimulation and to stand apart from the crowd. But this courage is what makes silence radical. It is not the absence of action. It is the refusal to surrender your mind to forces that profit from keeping you restless. Buddhism has long taught that liberation is found not in chasing what the world offers, but in stepping beyond its illusions. Silence is the modern form of that teaching. To be quiet in a world addicted to noise is to practice liberation in real time. It is to declare that your peace cannot be bought, your attention cannot be stolen, and your being cannot be defined by distraction. This rebellion has practical effects as well. With silence, your decisions become clearer because they are not clouded by constant influence. Your relationships become deeper because you are truly present rather than half distracted. Your creativity flourishes because space replaces clutter. These are not small changes, they are transformative shifts that ripple outward into every part of your life. In the end, silence is rebellion because it is freedom. It frees you from the compulsion to react, from the hunger for validation, from the endless noise that tries to tell you who you are. It returns you to yourself, and in doing so, it makes you ungovernable by distraction. The world may keep shouting, but your stillness stands as proof that there is another way to live, one that is not bound by noise, but liberated by silence. When silence becomes rebellion in a noisy world, you realize that your greatest act of freedom is not in shouting louder, but in refusing to be pulled into the endless performance of urgency. This realization naturally leads to a deeper question. If noise and constant striving are distractions, then what remains when you let them fall away? The answer is startling in its simplicity: doing nothing. Not the laziness the world warns against, not neglect of life's responsibilities, but a profound practice that Zen calls the art of simply being. It is here, in the space where effort drops away, that life begins to move with you instead of against you. Doing nothing in the Zen sense is not emptiness, but openness. It is a return to the state of allowing, where you stop pushing, forcing, and manipulating life into shapes it resists. This is not passivity, but a different kind of action, one aligned with the natural flow of things. The modern world trains you to measure worth by productivity, by how much you accomplish, by how busy you remain. But when you pause, when you withdraw from the constant need to control, something unexpected happens. Life itself begins to synchronize around you. This art begins with trust. To sit quietly without rushing to fill the space is to trust that existence itself is enough. Most restlessness comes from the belief that you must always be fixing, improving, or proving something. Doing nothing dissolves this illusion. When you let yourself rest fully in the present, without demanding it be different, you discover that the moment is already complete. This shift is not intellectual, it is experiential. The stillness itself reveals that peace does not need conditions. Zen teaches that the mind creates endless suffering by clinging to effort. The harder you try to force outcomes, the more you entangle yourself in frustration. Doing nothing is the antidote. It means stepping back, loosening your grip, and allowing what is already unfolding to show itself. The paradox is that by not pushing, life often moves more smoothly. Situations resolve themselves, opportunities appear, and clarity rises without strain. Synchronicity is born not from control but from alignment. One of the hidden truths of this practice is that effort often comes from fear. You work endlessly because you fear falling behind. You push conversations because you fear being misunderstood. You plan obsessively because you fear uncertainty. Doing nothing exposes these fears by removing the shield of constant activity. In the silence of non-doing, you face the raw discomfort of simply being with yourself, and in that confrontation, you learn that the fear dissolves when you no longer run from it. This does not mean abandoning responsibility. Zen is not about ignoring the practicalities of life. It is about shifting the source of your action. Instead of acting from fear, anxiety, or compulsion, you act from clarity. The pause of doing nothing creates space for wiser action to arise. When you stop rushing to fill the silence, your choices become more deliberate, more aligned with what truly matters. There is also a profound healing in this practice. The body and mind, constantly pushed and overextended, find restoration in stillness. Doing nothing is like allowing the soil to rest after harvest so it can regain its fertility. In modern life, rest is undervalued, even shamed. Yet without rest, there can be no renewal, no creativity, no balance. Zen reclaims this truth, showing that non-doing is not waste, but nourishment. The art of doing nothing also reveals how deeply you have been conditioned to identify with effort. Many people feel guilty when they pause, as if stillness is a failure. But in Zen, stillness is mastery. It is the recognition that life is not measured by constant movement, but by depth of presence. When you rest in non-doing, You see that worth does not come from activity, it comes from being. As you practice, synchronicities begin to appear. You notice that when you stop forcing outcomes, the right people, opportunities, and answers seem to arise naturally. This is not magic, but alignment. By quieting the restless mind and releasing the need to control, you become more attuned to the natural rhythms of life. You notice connections you would have missed, patterns that were always there but hidden by your rushing. Doing nothing makes you receptive, and receptivity invites synchronicity. This practice also changes how you see time. Effortful living makes you feel as if time is always running out, always chasing you. Non-doing dissolves that pressure. When you rest fully in the present, time expands. A single breath feels vast, a moment feels complete. In this way, doing nothing is not wasted time, but timelessness itself. You are no longer pulled between past and future. You are rooted in the fullness of now. The Zen masters often spoke of this through paradox. One said, "Sitting quietly, doing nothing, spring comes and the grass grows by itself." This simple line holds a profound truth. Life unfolds whether you push or not. Your role is not to force the grass to grow, but to align with the rhythm that is already carrying it forward. Doing nothing is a surrender to this truth. It is allowing life to reveal its own timing. Even creativity flows from this state. Artists, writers, thinkers all know that inspiration does not come from constant effort, but from spaciousness. The best ideas often arise when the mind is at rest, not when it is straining. Doing nothing creates the fertile ground where insight naturally blooms. In this sense, non-doing is the source of the most meaningful doing. The practice also strips away the illusion of control. You realize that much of what you thought you managed was always moving on its own. Breathing happens without your effort. The earth spins without your command. Seasons change without your control. Doing nothing aligns you with this reality. You stop carrying the unnecessary burden of believing you must control everything, and in releasing that weight, you find freedom. This freedom changes your relationships as well. When you stop forcing conversations, others feel more space to be themselves. When you stop pushing outcomes, relationships unfold more naturally. Non-doing creates an atmosphere of ease where genuine connection can thrive. You are no longer trying to mold others into what you want. You are allowing them to reveal themselves as they are. Doing nothing, then, is not withdrawal from life, but a deeper participation in it. It is stepping into harmony with what is already moving, already alive, already unfolding. It teaches you that life is not something to conquer, but something to join. And when you join it with openness instead of effort, synchronicity begins to carry you. The right doors open, the right paths reveal themselves, the right timing arrives not because you forced it, but because you stopped standing in the way. In the end, the art of doing nothing is one of the most radical practices of Zen, because it dismantles the very illusion the modern world clings to, that worth is earned only through effort. In truth, your worth is already complete. Doing nothing allows you to feel that truth directly, and from that place, when you do act, your actions are not frantic attempts to prove yourself, but natural expressions of being. This is the quiet secret of non-doing. It is not absence, but presence in its purest form. It is not emptiness, but fullness without striving. And when you live this way, life itself begins to feel lighter, clearer, more aligned, as though everything is quietly falling into place, not through force, but through the power of simply being. When the Zen art of doing nothing takes root, you begin to see that letting go of effort does not mean life falls apart. In fact, it often means life begins to organize itself in ways you could never have planned. What feels chaotic when you cling tightly becomes fluid when you release control. Non-doing opens a doorway, And through that doorway, silence reveals its next gift: space. Not the kind of space measured in distance, but the inner spaciousness that clears the clutter of the mind, making room for life to realign itself with clarity and balance. Silence as space is not absence. It is presence without obstruction. Most of the time, the mind is so packed with noise, thoughts, worries, expectations, that there is no room for truth to arise. It is like a room so full of furniture that nothing new can enter. Silence empties that room. It does not erase your life. It simply clears enough space for life to breathe, to reorder itself, to show you what truly belongs and what does not. This inner spaciousness is where clarity is born. When the mind is crowded, decisions feel heavy and confusing. You overthink, you second-guess, you analyze endlessly. But when silence opens space within, clarity often arrives on its own, like sunlight streaming into an open field. It does not come because you forced it, but because you made room for it to appear. Many of the answers people spend years searching for arise naturally in stillness, once the mental clutter has been set aside. Space also invites balance. Life often feels overwhelming because everything seems urgent and pressing. Yet when you pause in silence, you begin to see the natural rhythm beneath the surface. What is truly important rises clearly, while what is unnecessary fades into the background. This ordering is not something you construct. It emerges naturally when the noise subsides. The spacious mind knows intuitively what to prioritize because it is no longer clouded by constant distraction. In Buddhism, this spaciousness is connected to the practice of letting go. The more tightly you hold to plans, identities, and outcomes, the more suffocated your mind becomes. Silence loosens your grip. It creates room for change, room for possibility, room for the unexpected. In this openness, life rearranges itself. What once felt like a crisis may reveal itself as an opportunity. What once felt unbearable may dissolve into insignificance. Space allows you to see beyond the narrow perspective of control. This inner openness also transforms relationships. When your mind is crowded, you project your noise onto others. You listen not to hear but to reply. You see people through the filter of your expectations. But when you cultivate silence as space, you approach others with a clearer presence. You hear them more deeply, without rushing to impose your own agenda. This creates a sense of safety, allowing genuine connection to flourish. In this way, your inner spaciousness becomes a gift that reshapes the outer world. Spaciousness also reveals how little needs to be forced. When you release control, life often arranges itself more harmoniously than your plans ever could. The right opportunities come at the right time. Obstacles dissolve when you stop pushing against them. Relationships settle into their natural balance. This is not passivity, but alignment, trusting that when you create the space, life itself knows how to flow into order. There is also healing in this practice. Many inner wounds fester because the mind is too crowded to process them. Pain is avoided, buried under distractions, numbed by constant activity. Silence gives space for these wounds to surface gently. By allowing them to rise without resistance, you give them the room they need to heal. Just as a wound needs air to close, the heart needs space to release. In silence, what was once suffocating begins to loosen its hold. Inner space is also essential for creativity. No innovation, no deep insight, no great work of art has ever come from a mind overwhelmed by noise. Creativity requires emptiness, a gap where something new can arise. Silence provides that gap. When you are not filling every moment with sound or thought, inspiration has room to enter. This is why so many profound ideas surface during still moments, walking quietly, sitting in nature, resting in meditation. Space is the soil where creativity takes root. Cultivating space also reshapes how you move through time. Normally, the mind is trapped in past regrets or future worries, leaving no room for the present to be felt. Silence opens the present wide, giving it space to breathe. Time slows, not because the clock has changed, but because you are no longer rushing past each moment. In this spaciousness, even ordinary activities, breathing, walking, sipping tea, take on a depth you never noticed before. In Zen, there is an understanding that spaciousness is the natural state of mind. The noise and clutter are temporary disturbances, like clouds covering the sky. When silence clears them away, the vast openness is revealed, not something new, but something that was always there. This realization is liberating. You begin to see that you do not need to manufacture peace. You only need to make room for it to emerge. The practice of silence as space also exposes the futility of control. Life cannot be micromanaged into perfection. The more you try to hold everything tightly, the more fragile it becomes. But when you create space, life has room to adjust itself. Just as water finds its own level when poured into a container, life finds its own balance when given space. Your role is not to force but to allow, not to dominate but to create the conditions for harmony. This openness shifts your sense of identity as well. Instead of clinging to rigid labels, you begin to experience yourself as spacious, flexible, fluid. You are no longer bound by a narrow self-image. In space, you discover freedom, the freedom to change, to grow, to release what no longer serves you. This freedom radiates into every area of life, making you more resilient, adaptable, and at peace. Ultimately, silence as space is about trust. Trust that you do not need to fill every moment, solve every problem, or control every outcome. Trust that when you make room within, life arranges itself without. Trust that clarity, balance, and healing emerge not from force, but from openness. This trust is not blind faith. It is something you experience directly when you practice. Over and over, silence shows you that when you stop crowding your life, order reveals itself. In this way, spaciousness is not just a personal refuge, but a universal principle. It is the ground where clarity grows, the container where healing unfolds, the openness where life aligns. By cultivating inner space, you allow the natural order of existence to emerge, and in that emergence, you find a peace that no amount of effort could ever create. When silence becomes space, you begin to feel the relief of openness. The clutter of thought loosens, clarity appears without effort, and life begins to settle into its natural rhythm. But with this clarity comes another challenge: how to hold this inward focus without slipping into the trap of selfishness. Turning inward can heal and restore, yet if misunderstood, it can harden into isolation, indifference, or self-absorption. The balance between caring for yourself and remaining connected to others is delicate, and Buddhism speaks clearly to this line. Focusing on yourself is often confused with ego-centered living, but they are not the same. Ego thrives on comparison, on making yourself larger by making others smaller, on feeding identity through possession or recognition. Self-focus in the Buddhist sense is entirely different. It is the practice of tending to the mind so that your presence in the world does not cause harm. It is self-care that becomes the foundation for compassion rather than a wall of separation. The difference lies in intention. Self-absorption asks, how can I take more for myself? While mindful self-focus asks, how can I understand myself so I cause less suffering? The first narrows the heart. The second opens it. When you sit in silence to calm your own restlessness, you are not retreating from humanity, you are preparing yourself to return with steadiness. When you discipline your speech, you are not silencing yourself for selfish gain, you are preserving harmony for others. This is where the Buddhist principle of the middle way becomes vital. Too much outward focus without tending to yourself leads to burnout, resentment, and hidden expectations that others cannot meet. Too much inward focus without awareness of others leads to coldness, arrogance, or detachment from reality. The middle way is walking with both truths at once, that you must care for your own mind and also remain responsible to the collective life you are part of. Self-focus becomes selfish when it is rooted in craving. Craving for recognition, comfort, superiority, or escape can disguise itself as self-care. You may call it solitude, but in truth it is avoidance. You may call it discipline, but in truth it is self-centered perfectionism. Silence reveals these hidden motives. When you turn inward, you begin to see whether your focus is cleansing the mind or simply feeding the ego in subtler ways. One of the clearest signs of mindful self-focus is how it affects your relationships. If your inward practice makes you more patient, more compassionate, more available in presence, even if not always in words, then it is aligned with wisdom. If your inward practice makes you dismissive, detached, or indifferent to the struggles of others, then it has drifted into selfishness. Silence and self-reflection are meant to dissolve barriers, not build them higher. The Buddha often used the image of tending a lamp. If the flame is unprotected, it is blown out by the slightest wind. If the lamp is cared for, it not only survives but gives light to others. Self-focus is tending to your flame, ensuring that your energy, clarity, and compassion are strong enough to be shared. But if you tend the flame only to admire its light for yourself, it loses its purpose. The lamp exists to shine outward as well as inward. This teaching also requires honesty about boundaries. There are times when stepping back to focus on yourself is the most compassionate choice you can make. If your words would come from anger, silence spares others from harm. If your energy is exhausted, rest prevents resentment later. This is not selfishness but wisdom, knowing that care for the self is also care for the whole. The line is crossed only when self-focus becomes indulgence at the expense of others. Another way Buddhism draws this line is through the understanding of interdependence. You are not a separate self existing in isolation. Your state of mind influences everyone you meet, and their state of mind influences you. To focus on yourself is, in truth, to influence the collective. The health of one drop affects the health of the ocean. Self-care and compassion are not two paths but one, when viewed from the lens of interconnection. The danger of selfishness arises when you forget this truth and treat your inner work as if it exists only for you. A monk who meditates solely to escape the world misses the point of practice. A layperson who pursues self-care only for personal comfort misses the depth of its purpose. The real fruit of inner work is how it ripples outward. You practice to lighten your own suffering, yes, but also to avoid adding suffering to the world. This is compassion expressed through responsibility. Self-focus without selfishness also requires humility. The more you tend to your mind, the more you realize how fragile it can be, how often it is clouded by delusion, how easily it drifts into craving. This humility prevents your practice from becoming pride. You no longer see yourself as above others because you meditate or cultivate silence. Instead, you recognize the shared struggle of every human being trying to find peace. Your inward work deepens empathy rather than superiority. This humility is reinforced through the practice of right intention. Before turning inward, you ask, what is the purpose of this act? If it is to avoid, to escape, or to inflate the self, then it leads toward selfishness. If it is to clarify the mind, to dissolve restlessness, to strengthen compassion, then it leads toward liberation. Silence becomes a mirror that shows you which path you are walking. The paradox is that true self-focus often leads to forgetting the self. The more you tend to your mind, the more you see that the rigid I is an illusion. You begin to act less from ego and more from awareness. In this way, self-focus that begins as personal healing naturally dissolves into care for the world. You do not have to force compassion. It arises when the barriers of ego are softened. The modern world often mislabels self-absorption as empowerment. It tells you to prioritize yourself, but often in ways that encourage indulgence, comparison, or superiority. Buddhism corrects this misunderstanding. Empowerment comes not from inflating the self, but from seeing through it. The empowerment of true self-focus is the freedom to act without being driven by craving or fear, to care without being trapped by expectation, to give without needing to prove. Ultimately, the line between self-focus and selfishness is drawn by awareness. Are you turning inward to polish the mind so it can reflect clarity outward? Or are you turning inward to build walls and preserve comfort? Only silence can show you the difference, and only honesty can keep you aligned. When this balance is lived, you discover that caring for yourself is never at odds with caring for others. They are two sides of the same act. The more you dissolve your own restlessness, the more peace you bring into every room you enter. The more you heal your own wounds, the less likely you are to wound others. The more you free yourself from ego, the more naturally compassion flows. Self-focus, then, is not selfishness at all. It is the preparation for love in its purest form, a love that requires nothing in return because it flows from clarity rather than need. When the balance between self-focus and selfishness becomes clear, silence takes on a new depth. It is no longer only about calming the mind or tending to your own clarity, but about discovering teachings that words alone cannot carry. Scriptures and teachers can point toward truth, but the deepest lessons often reveal themselves in the pauses, in the moments when nothing is spoken and yet everything is understood. This is the unspoken dharma, the wisdom of silence that slips between words, teaching through presence, stillness, and the spaces in which language cannot reach. The power of silence as a teacher lies in its directness. Words require interpretation. They pass through filters of memory, culture, and personal bias. But silence bypasses these filters. It does not ask you to analyze or compare. It invites you to experience directly. In a pause, you meet yourself without distraction. In stillness, truth emerges without adornment. Many people spend years studying texts yet never touch the heart of wisdom, while a single moment of true silence can break illusions that words could not dissolve. Pauses carry weight because they reveal what is often hidden beneath speech. Teachers in the Buddhist tradition often leave gaps between words, not because they have nothing to say, but because the silence itself is the teaching. It forces the student to sit with their own mind, to confront the discomfort of waiting, to notice what arises in the absence of instruction. In those moments, you learn patience, presence, and the art of listening without expectation. Silence also teaches humility. When you pause instead of filling space with explanations, you realize how much of speech is driven by the need to prove or control. In silence, that need fades, and you are left with the vastness of not knowing. This openness to not knowing is itself a form of wisdom. The greatest teachers remind us that truth cannot be fully captured in words, and silence is their way of pointing to what lies beyond language. The unspoken dharma is also about presence. When a teacher sits quietly, the lesson is not in the words, but in the energy of being fully there. That presence speaks more loudly than instruction, showing that wisdom is not something to memorize, but something to embody. You begin to realize that the way someone holds silence can communicate peace, compassion, or clarity more powerfully than any sermon. This kind of teaching is subtle, but it imprints itself deeply on those who are willing to receive it. Pauses also reveal the impermanence of thought. When you sit quietly between words, you notice how quickly the mind wants to fill the gap, reaching for distraction, grasping at explanations, pushing away discomfort. In observing this, you learn how restless the mind truly is. And in that recognition, you begin to loosen your attachment to thought itself. Silence shows you that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness beneath them. This unspoken teaching can also dissolve pride. In conversation, silence often feels uncomfortable because it strips away the shield of constant expression. When you allow a pause without rushing to fill it, you expose the ego's hunger for attention and validation. Learning to rest in that pause without fear is a lesson in humility, teaching you that you do not need to prove your worth with endless words. Silence as dharma is especially powerful in meditation. Scriptures can instruct you on posture or breath, but the true lesson comes when you sit and face yourself. In that stillness, you learn patience, endurance, and clarity, not from theory but from direct experience. The body aches, the mind resists, distractions arise, but as you remain, you begin to see the impermanence of all of it. These lessons are not spoken, yet they shape your understanding more deeply than text ever could. The pauses in life carry this same wisdom. A pause before reacting in anger teaches restraint. A pause after hearing criticism teaches reflection. A pause in grief teaches acceptance. These lessons do not come from words, but from the space you allow between impulse and response. Each pause is a chance to choose differently, to break the cycle of habit and step into awareness. Even in the natural world, silence teaches. The stillness of a forest, the quiet before dawn, the pause between waves, all carry a depth that no scripture can reproduce. To sit in nature's silence is to be reminded that wisdom is not confined to books or temples. It is woven into existence itself, waiting in the spaces where noise does not dominate. What makes the unspoken dharma so transformative is that it cannot be argued with. Words can be debated, misunderstood, twisted. Silence cannot. It simply is, and in its presence, you either open to it or resist it. If you open, it teaches without effort. If you resist, it reveals the restlessness still living in you. Either way, it brings you face to face with truth. This teaching also strips away dependency. A teacher's words can make you dependent on their guidance. Silence, however, points you back to your own awareness. It forces you to trust your direct experience, to rely on your own clarity rather than leaning on external authority. In this sense, the unspoken dharma is the most empowering form of teaching. It returns the responsibility of awakening to you. Over time, practicing silence as dharma changes your relationship with language itself. Words no longer feel like the ultimate authority, but as tools useful but limited. You begin to value the pauses between sentences as much as the sentences themselves. You learn to listen not just to what is said, but to the silence surrounding it. In this way, silence deepens your perception of life as a whole. The unspoken dharma also reveals compassion in a unique way. To sit with someone in silence during their suffering can sometimes bring more comfort than words ever could. The pause itself communicates presence, care, and patience. It tells them they are not alone without the need for explanation. This silent compassion is often more healing than any advice. Ultimately, silence teaches that truth is not something external to be given, but something internal to be revealed. The pauses are not empty. They are full of the opportunity to see directly, to feel fully, to awaken without distraction. Scriptures guide, teachers point, but silence delivers you to the experience itself. The unspoken dharma is the reminder that wisdom does not always arrive through sound. Sometimes it arrives through stillness, through presence, through the quiet recognition that what you were seeking has always been within you. And in learning from silence, you discover a truth that words could never fully capture, that peace is not taught but uncovered, not explained but lived. When silence begins to reveal lessons that words cannot, You understand that wisdom does not always come through instruction, but often through restraint, through what is not said, through the space left open for discovery. This understanding naturally unfolds into the next dimension of silence, how it can shape relationships. Silence is not only a path inward, it is also a way of loving others without controlling them. This form of love is subtle and rare. It is not about giving advice at every turn or fixing others' lives, but about stepping back inwardly and letting them walk their own path. Silent detachment becomes a higher form of compassion because it honors the freedom of another soul to learn in their own time, without interference. To love silently in this way requires a deep trust. Most of the suffering in relationships comes not from lack of care, but from the urge to control, wanting others to think like us, act like us, make choices that match our vision of what is right. Even when the motive is love, control creates tension. The more tightly you hold someone, the less space they have to grow. Silent detachment dissolves this tension. It says, "I care for you enough to let you live your own journey." This does not mean cold withdrawal. Detachment in Buddhism is not indifference, it is freedom from clinging. When you cling to outcomes for others, you love them conditionally. You are only at peace if they behave as you want. True love lets go of those conditions. It supports without demanding, encourages without controlling, stands near without suffocating. In silence, you learn that this kind of love is not passive, it is active, respect for the other's autonomy. Silent detachment also heals the subtle wounds of pride. Often, when you try to direct others, it is not only for their benefit, but also to satisfy your own sense of importance. You want to feel needed, to feel wise, to feel in control. In silence, these hidden motives surface. By restraining the urge to always intervene, you humble yourself and give others the dignity of walking their own path. This humility is itself a form of love. There is also compassion in knowing when your words will not help. Many times, advice falls on ears not ready to hear. Attempts to guide can harden resistance rather than soften it. Silent detachment understands timing. It trusts that each person will come to realization when the conditions are right. Instead of pushing, it waits patiently, offering presence without pressure. In this waiting, love shows itself as faith in the other's inner capacity to learn. This practice changes how you listen. When you no longer feel the need to control or fix, you listen more deeply. You hear not just the words of another, but the silence beneath their words, the fears, the longings, the uncertainties they may not even recognize themselves. And because you are not rushing to fill the silence with solutions, your presence becomes a mirror in which they can hear themselves more clearly. Often, this is more healing than any advice. Silent detachment also protects relationships from the exhaustion of over-involvement. When you constantly try to direct others, you drain yourself and create dependency in them. Neither truly grows. But when you step back inwardly, you conserve your energy and empower them to find their own strength. This balance makes relationships healthier, built on mutual respect rather than control. Another layer of this practice is letting go of outcomes. Love is often entangled with expectation, hoping someone will succeed in the way you define success, or avoid mistakes you fear for them. But life cannot be lived through another's script. Silent detachment accepts this truth. It releases the illusion of ownership over another's journey. It allows life to teach them in its own way, even if that means mistakes, even if that means pain. Trusting that their path is theirs to walk is one of the highest forms of love. This is not easy, because silence in the face of someone's struggle can feel like abandonment. But true detachment is not abandonment, it is presence without interference. It is sitting with someone in their difficulty without rushing to erase it. It is offering support without trying to rewrite their story. This kind of love requires inner strength, because it resists the ego's desire to feel useful. but its effect is profound. It gives others the rare gift of being fully seen and accepted exactly as they are. Silent detachment also teaches patience. Growth is slow, and no amount of pushing can speed it up. Just as a flower opens in its own season, people open when the time is right. To wait without forcing, to love without clinging, to remain steady without demanding, this is patience lived as love, and silence is the soil where this patience grows. The practice also transforms how you respond to conflict. Instead of rushing to correct or argue, you pause. You allow the heat to cool, the noise to fade, the clarity to emerge naturally. Often, silence does more to resolve tension than words ever could. It shows that you value peace over winning, respect over dominance. This restraint communicates love in a language beyond speech. Silent detachment even reshapes how you see yourself in relation to others. You stop viewing yourself as responsible for their choices and them as responsible for your peace. Each becomes free to walk their own path. Love remains, but it is no longer tangled with control. This mutual freedom strengthens bonds because love that is freely given, not demanded, is the most enduring. In Buddhism, compassion is not about fixing the world according to your preferences, but about alleviating suffering through understanding. Silent detachment is this compassion in action. It understands that people often need space to face their own causes and conditions. By stepping back inwardly, you allow life itself to be their teacher. Your role is not to shield them from every lesson, but to be steady when they need support. Over time, this practice deepens your own peace. The less you cling to controlling others, the lighter your heart becomes. You no longer carry the weight of trying to manage lives that were never yours to manage. You no longer exhaust yourself by pushing against the natural flow of another's journey. Instead, you rest in the freedom of letting people be who they are, while offering love that does not bind. And this love, silent and detached, is perhaps the most powerful of all, because it does not impose, it allows. Because it does not demand, it respects. Because it does not control, it frees. In this way, silence teaches that the greatest gift you can give another is not to mold them in your image, but to trust the truth of their path, even when it looks different from yours. That trust, held quietly and steadily, is love in its purest form. When love takes the shape of silent detachment, you discover a freedom that softens both you and those you care for. Stepping back inwardly allows others to walk their own path, and in that restraint you create space for growth without control. Yet this stepping back also reveals another truth. Silence alone can feel vast, even overwhelming, unless it is anchored in something steady. That anchor is always with you, woven into your very being, your breath. Breathing is more than a biological necessity. It is the soundless rhythm that connects body, mind, and awareness. To notice it, to engage with it consciously, is to find the bridge between silence and self-awareness. Breathing is the most immediate teacher you carry. It is constant, yet often ignored. You can live without food for weeks, without water for days, but only a few minutes without breath. And still, most people pass through their lives barely aware of it. Silence changes this. When you quiet the external noise and stop filling space with endless words or distractions, the breath comes forward. It becomes not just air moving in and out, but a doorway into presence. The simplicity of breathing is what makes it profound. It requires no special tools, no elaborate rituals, no preparation. All that is needed is attention. By resting awareness on the breath, you begin to notice subtleties, how it enters cool and leaves warm, how it rises in the chest or belly, how it shifts with emotions. In moments of fear, breath quickens. In calm, it slows. This link between breath and mind is direct, and through it, silence gains depth. Conscious breathing transforms silence from emptiness into fullness. Without the breath as anchor, silence can feel like a void, leaving the restless mind scrambling to fill it. But when you stay with the breath, silence becomes alive. Each inhale and exhale is like a bell ringing softly within you, reminding you to return, to notice, to be here. The sound of silence is not absence but rhythm, the quiet, steady rhythm of your own life unfolding in breath. This practice also reveals how shallow daily breathing often is. In a life of rushing, people breathe from the chest, clipped and fast, barely sustaining themselves. This shallow breath mirrors a shallow awareness always at the surface, never sinking deeper. Conscious breathing invites depth. It encourages the belly to soften, the lungs to expand fully, the body to release tension, and as the breath deepens, the mind follows. Anxiety loosens, clarity rises, stillness takes root. Breath is also a bridge between the seen and unseen. Physically, it sustains your body. Subtly, it sustains awareness. Each breath carries oxygen to every cell, but it also carries your attention into the present. When you breathe consciously, the wandering mind has no ground for distraction. It returns, moment by moment, to the simple truth of being alive. In this way, breath unites silence and awareness, grounding the mind in the body so that presence is no longer abstract but lived. In Buddhist practice, mindfulness of breathing is often the first step in meditation, not because it is basic, but because it is foundational. To follow the breath is to learn the art of observing without interference. You do not control the breath. You witness it. You do not force it to be longer or shorter. You notice what it is. This observation teaches acceptance. It shows you how to meet reality as it is, without judgment or grasping. Breath also reveals impermanence with every cycle. Each inhale is born, each exhale passes away. No breath can be held forever. No breath can be repeated exactly. This rhythm reflects the larger truth of life itself. Everything arises and fades. Nothing clings. Nothing is permanent. To sit with the breath is to sit with the very nature of existence, experiencing impermanence not as an idea, but as a living truth in your body. The healing power of breath emerges here too. Restlessness, anxiety, anger all soften when attention returns to the breath. Not because the breath erases problems, but because it brings you back to balance. When you are anxious, the mind races into the future. When you are angry, it is trapped in the past. Breath anchors you in the present, the only place where peace can truly exist. This anchoring is why conscious breathing has been used for centuries as both meditation and medicine. Breathing consciously also teaches patience. You cannot rush the breath. You cannot force it to give more than it does. You must move at its pace, which is the pace of life itself. This patience seeps into your way of living. Instead of forcing outcomes, you begin to flow with rhythm. Instead of demanding speed, you learn to wait. Each breath becomes a teacher of balance, slowing the restless mind and grounding the body in calm. In silence, breath becomes language. Where words fail, breath communicates. A long exhale can calm another person in your presence. Steady breathing can signal safety without a word spoken. Shared silence, connected by breath, creates intimacy more profound than speech. In this way, conscious breathing not only deepens your relationship with yourself, but also with others. It teaches that silence, supported by breath, is never emptiness, but connection. This bridge between silence and awareness also changes how you experience time. Normally, time feels fragmented, rushing, scattered, broken into tasks and deadlines. But when you follow the breath, time becomes continuous. There is no past or future, only the rhythm of this inhale, this exhale. The mind settles, the heart steadies, and you feel carried by a flow larger than yourself. This sense of timelessness is not escape, but clarity. It shows that life has always been unfolding breath by breath, whether you noticed or not. Breath also reveals the unity of body and mind. Often people treat them as separate, the body as physical, the mind as abstract. But the breath unites them. An anxious thought tightens the chest. A calm thought deepens the inhale. By working with the breath, you affect both body and mind together. Conscious breathing is holistic. It heals fragmentation by showing that you are not pieces, but a living whole. Finally, breathing as silence carries a lesson in surrender. Each exhale is a letting go. You release air you cannot keep. Trust that the next inhale will arrive. This rhythm mirrors the rhythm of life itself, holding and releasing, beginning and ending, trusting the unseen continuity. To breathe consciously is to practice letting go with every cycle. It is to rehearse surrender in the smallest way so that you can live surrender in the largest. Through all of this, breath proves itself as the quiet teacher you always carry, the link between silence and awareness, the steady rhythm that grounds your presence. To notice it is to hear the sound of silence made visible in your own body. To live it is to transform silence from emptiness into a living, breathing clarity. And in that clarity, you find the deepest awareness, not through effort or words, but through the simple act of being fully here, breath after breath. When the breath reveals itself as the bridge between silence and self-awareness, you begin to see how every inhale grounds you, and every exhale teaches release. With each cycle, you are reminded that stillness is not empty but alive, carrying you closer to clarity. And yet, once this inner rhythm becomes steady, another truth rises to the surface. Silence and self-awareness do not only calm you inwardly, they also shield you outwardly. They protect you in a world where negativity spreads easily, where criticism, anger, and distraction cling to those who are not rooted within. This is where the lesson of the lotus emerges. The lotus grows in muddy water, yet its petals remain pure, unstained by the mud that surrounds it. In the same way, when you turn inward, you find the power to rise above without making noise, to bloom untouched by the world's negativity. The strength of the lotus is not in fighting the mud, but in simply not allowing it to define its nature. Likewise, focusing inward does not mean resisting or battling every criticism, every hostile opinion, or every distraction. It means knowing that what surrounds you does not have to stain you. Silence becomes your protective layer, a boundary that negativity cannot pierce. By resting in your own stillness, you rise in dignity without having to defend or retaliate. This rising above is not about arrogance. It is not about believing you are better than others. It is about recognizing that you are not obligated to carry the weight of every judgment or conflict that comes your way. When you focus inward, you discover that your peace does not depend on the approval or disapproval of others. Just as the lotus remains untouched, no matter how dirty the water, your inner clarity remains intact when you refuse to let external noise dictate your worth. The practice of rising above through inward focus begins with awareness. Negativity often hooks you because it enters unnoticed. A harsh word triggers anger. Criticism sparks defensiveness. Gossip pulls you into reaction. But when your attention rests within, anchored by silence, you notice the moment negativity tries to touch you. Instead of reacting blindly, you pause. That pause is the difference between sinking into the mud and rising beyond it. Another key is perspective. Silence teaches you to see negativity for what it is, an expression of someone else's pain, fear, or confusion, not a reflection of your truth. When you cultivate this perspective, external attacks lose their power. You do not need to answer every provocation or prove every judgment wrong. The lotus does not argue with the mud. it simply blooms above it. Likewise, your silence becomes your statement, your calm presence, your response. Inward focus also prevents you from being consumed by comparison. Much of external negativity comes not only from others, but from your own mind, measuring yourself against standards, chasing approval, fearing failure. By focusing inward, you recognize these comparisons as noise. Silence reveals that your worth is not defined by how you measure against others, but by the clarity and integrity you cultivate within yourself. Rising above negativity also requires consistency. Just as the lotus continues to grow day after day despite the water around it, you must return to your inward practice regularly. Silence is not a one-time retreat, but a discipline that protects you from being swept into the chaos of the world. Each time you return to your inner stillness, you strengthen the roots that allow you to rise higher. This way of living also transforms how you engage with the world. Instead of reacting with anger when faced with hostility, you respond with calm, or at times with nothing at all. This does not mean you accept injustice, but that you choose your battles wisely. You no longer waste energy on every insult or distraction. You conserve your strength for what truly matters. In this sense, silence is not avoidance but wisdom, a way of directing your energy where it can bring real growth. The lotus also teaches resilience. It does not demand perfect conditions to bloom. It rises from the very mud that could have drowned it, turning what seems impure into the foundation for beauty. In your own life, focusing inward allows you to do the same. Criticism, failure, hardship all become soil from which strength grows, as long as you do not let them define you. Silence transforms adversity into nourishment, patience into resilience, stillness into strength. In this practice, there is also freedom. When you no longer need to react to every negative force, you reclaim your power. External noise no longer pulls you into endless cycles of defense and explanation. You are free to walk your path, guided not by approval or fear of rejection, but by the clarity within. This freedom feels like lightness, a release from burdens you once thought you had to carry. Rising above without noise also deepens your compassion. When you are no longer consumed by defending yourself, you have the space to see others more clearly. You begin to understand that those who spread negativity are often drowning in their own mud, trapped in pain they do not know how to release. Your silence becomes a form of compassion, refusing to add more anger to what is already heavy. Instead of contributing to their suffering, you choose not to feed it. This is not weakness, but strength. The world often mistakes silence for submission, but true silence is powerful. It is the refusal to be shaken, the ability to remain steady when others try to provoke chaos. This strength is quiet but undeniable. Like the lotus blooming in stillness, your calm presence becomes impossible to ignore, shining brighter than any argument ever could. Over time, living this way transforms how you see yourself. You stop identifying with every external label, every judgment thrown your way. You realize that your worth does not rise and fall with the world's noise. It comes from the stillness you have cultivated, the clarity you carry inside. This realization is liberation, the freedom to live untouched by negativity, blooming in peace no matter the conditions around you. In the end, the lotus effect is not about escaping the world, but about showing that purity, clarity, and dignity are possible within it. Just as the lotus grows not despite the mud, but because of it, you can rise not despite challenges, but through them. Silence and inward focus become your shield, your nourishment, your strength. And when you live this way, you discover that you do not need to fight noise with more noise. You bloom quietly, untouched, and in that quiet blooming, you reveal the power of rising above. When you rise above negativity with the quiet strength of the lotus, you begin to see that not every storm requires your participation. You do not need to defend yourself against every criticism or wrestle with every judgment. And this insight leads naturally to another form of inner power, the courage to step away from arguments. In a world that glorifies winning debates, proving others wrong, and speaking louder than everyone else, the decision to withdraw can seem weak. Yet in truth, it takes far more strength to refuse the invitation to conflict than to enter it. This hidden courage is one of the most transformative powers silence gives you, because it preserves your peace while shifting the dynamic of the world around you. Arguments have an energy that feeds on reaction. The moment you respond defensively, the fire grows. Each word becomes fuel, each point a spark that keeps the cycle alive. You may win for a moment, but the cost is heavy: inner tension, broken relationships, wasted energy. What most people call victory in argument is often nothing more than the satisfaction of ego. Silence offers a different kind of victory, one that does not wound you or others. By withdrawing, you deny the argument its fuel. You let the fire burn out on its own, leaving behind peace instead of ashes. Withdrawing from arguments does not mean you have no conviction. It does not mean you avoid truth or allow harm to go unchecked. It means you understand the futility of proving yourself to those who are not ready to hear. It means you recognize that wisdom does not require defense. Just as the lotus blooms without noise, truth shines without constant argument. When you know your center, you no longer need the world's agreement to validate it. This courage begins with self-awareness. Most arguments do not arise from genuine curiosity, but from ego clashing with ego. The need to be right, to be seen as superior, to protect identity, these drive conflict more than truth does. By stepping inward, you begin to notice this impulse in yourself. You see the urge to reply, the rise of defensiveness, the craving to have the last word. And in seeing it, you create the space to choose differently. That pause is the birthplace of courage. The power of silence in arguments lies in its disarming effect. When someone expects resistance, and you do not provide it, the force of their attack weakens. Your silence becomes a mirror, reflecting their energy back to them. Sometimes, this makes them realize the futility of their own anger. Sometimes, it simply ends the conflict without escalation. Either way, your silence changes the pattern, creating space where aggression cannot thrive. This practice also frees you from the endless cycle of justification. The more you argue, the more you feel compelled to defend, to explain, to prove. Each explanation ties you further into the web of conflict. But when you step back, you reclaim your time and energy. You realize you are not obligated to explain yourself to everyone. Not every misunderstanding requires correction. Not every attack requires defense. By walking away, you affirm that your peace is more valuable than your pride. There is a humility in this courage. To withdraw from arguments means letting go of the need to win, the need to appear superior. It is admitting that victory is not always external but internal. The world may see silence as surrender, but within you, it feels like liberation. You are no longer bound to the exhausting game of one-upmanship. You rest in the deeper, knowing that peace is worth more than applause. This hidden courage is transformative because it changes relationships. Arguments often leave scars even when resolved. Harsh words linger, trust weakens, bonds fray. By refusing to engage, you preserve relationships that might otherwise fracture. Silence communicates that you value peace more than being right, respect more than dominance. This builds trust over time, even if it is not recognized immediately. It also strengthens resilience. Each time you walk away from conflict, you prove to yourself that you are not controlled by impulse. You grow in patience, in clarity, in mastery over your own emotions. This mastery is not cold detachment, but warm steadiness, the ability to remain rooted while storms pass around you. It is strength hidden beneath gentleness, a courage that does not shout but endures. In Buddhist practice, this restraint reflects the principle of right action. Arguments often lead to harm, harsh words, broken peace, lingering resentment. By withdrawing, you prevent harm before it begins. This is not passivity, it is wisdom in action. It is choosing the path that nurtures harmony rather than feeding division. In this sense, silence is not avoidance but responsibility, the responsibility to protect peace, both within and without. Over time, you realize that arguments rarely change hearts. Debates may sharpen intellect, but transformation comes from presence, not persuasion. People are moved more by the calm strength of your silence than by the sharpness of your rebuttals. By refusing to argue, you plant a seed in others, an unspoken invitation to question why you do not need to fight. That seed can grow long after the moment has passed. This hidden courage also deepens self-trust. When you stop chasing validation through arguments, you rely on your own clarity instead of others' approval. You begin to trust your inner knowing more than external agreement. This trust makes you less vulnerable to manipulation, less shaken by criticism, less desperate to prove yourself. Silence strengthens the foundation of your being in a way arguments never could. Withdrawing from arguments also shifts the energy of the world around you. In a culture fueled by debate, outrage, and constant opposition, silence is radical. It breaks the cycle of hostility. It refuses to contribute to the noise. In choosing not to fight, you create a small pocket of peace. And when many people make this choice, those pockets grow into something powerful, reshaping the collective energy toward calm. Ultimately, this hidden courage is about choosing the kind of life you want to live. You can spend your days defending yourself, arguing endlessly, proving points that vanish with time. Or you can spend them cultivating peace, holding dignity, and rising above without noise. Silence offers you that choice. It teaches that victory is not in defeating another, but in refusing to be dragged down into battles that cost your spirit more than they are worth. To walk away is not weakness. To stay silent is not surrender. It is the strength of one who knows that storms pass on their own, that truth does not need to shout, and that the greatest victories are often the quietest. This is the courage of silence, the power to transform both yourself and the world, not through argument, but through restraint. When you discover the hidden courage of walking away from arguments, you begin to see that silence is not weakness, but wisdom. It saves you from wasting your energy on battles that only feed the ego. It allows you to remain steady, choosing peace over pride. And yet, beneath this choice lies an even deeper truth, one that silence itself begins to reveal when you stay with it long enough. Silence does more than calm. It points to the very nature of existence. The stillness you enter in those quiet moments is not just personal relief, it is a doorway into the Buddhist teaching of emptiness, or shunyata. Silence and emptiness are not two separate paths, but twin teachers, guiding you toward the same understanding, that everything is interconnected, fluid, and without a permanent self. Emptiness in Buddhism is often misunderstood. It does not mean that nothing exists or that life has no meaning. It means that nothing exists independently, fixed, or in isolation. Every form, every thought, every being arises because of countless conditions. The tree exists because of sunlight, soil, rain, air, and time. The breath exists because of lungs, body, and the surrounding atmosphere. Even your sense of self arises from memories, language, culture, and relationships. Emptiness points to this interdependence. Everything is connected, nothing stands alone. Silence brings this truth to life in direct experience. When the noise of the mind fades, you begin to notice how inseparable everything is. The breath you take is not yours alone. It is air shared with trees, with oceans, with generations before you. The calm you feel is not isolated. It is shaped by your practice, but also by the teachers who inspired it, the environment that supports it, the countless causes and conditions that made this moment possible. Silence makes the philosophy of emptiness tangible. When you rest in silence, the boundaries of the self loosen. You notice that thoughts come and go without your command. Emotions arise and fade like passing weather. Even the sense of I shifts from moment to moment, never fixed. In this recognition, emptiness becomes clear. The self is not a solid object, but a process, always changing, always shaped by conditions. Silence shows you this, not as theory but as direct truth felt in your body and mind. This understanding frees you from the weight of clinging. Much of suffering comes from holding tightly to what you believe is permanent identity, possessions, relationships, ideas. But silence reveals their impermanence. In quiet, you see how everything moves and transforms. What you thought was solid becomes fluid. This realization does not create despair but liberation. If nothing is fixed, then you are not trapped. You can change, let go, and flow with life rather than resist it. Emptiness also deepens compassion. When you see that nothing exists on its own, you understand that suffering is not isolated either. The pain of one being ripples into others, just as the kindness of one act spreads beyond what you can measure. In silence, you begin to feel this interconnectedness. Your stillness is not just for you, it affects the people around you, calming the atmosphere, shifting the energy of a room. Emptiness shows that your practice is never personal alone. It is part of a web where everything touches everything else. Silence as teacher also reveals the futility of separation. The ego thrives on dividing self and other, mine and yours, right and wrong. But when you sit in stillness, those divisions blur. The breath moving through you is the same air moving through all beings. The stillness in you reflects the stillness in the world. Emptiness becomes not just an idea, but a lived experience of unity. This twin teaching dismantles fear as well. Much fear arises from clinging to permanence, fear of losing what you think defines you, fear of change, fear of death. But when silence shows you that everything is interconnected and constantly shifting, you begin to trust the flow. Death is no longer absolute separation, but part of the cycle of transformation. Change is no longer threat, but natural rhythm. Emptiness replaces fear with acceptance. Another gift of these twin teachers is humility. Silence humbles the ego by stripping away its defenses. Emptiness humbles the mind by showing that the self is not the center of existence, but one thread in a vast web. This humility is not weakness, but strength. It frees you from the burden of always proving, always defending, always asserting. You can simply be part of the whole, at peace with the flow of interdependence. Emptiness also changes how you approach truth itself. Words and concepts can only point to it, never capture it fully. Scriptures describe emptiness, but silence lets you taste it. In the quiet, when thought falls away, you experience directly the spaciousness of being, the openness that cannot be confined by language. It is this direct encounter that transforms philosophy into lived wisdom. Living with the awareness of emptiness and silence reshapes every choice. You act with more care, knowing that what you do touches countless others. You let go more easily, knowing that nothing can be held forever. You forgive more freely, knowing that clinging to resentment ties you to illusions. You love more deeply, knowing that separation is only an appearance. The twin teachers also prepare you for life's uncertainties. When you understand emptiness, change no longer surprises you, it is expected. When you cultivate silence, you have the inner stillness to meet change without panic. Together, they create resilience. The mind remains steady because it understands the fluid nature of reality, and the heart remains open because it feels connected to all that is. Ultimately, Emptiness and silence both teach the same truth. That peace is not found in clinging, but in letting go. They show you that freedom is not in isolation, but in interconnection. They reveal that wisdom is not in endless words, but in the quiet recognition of what has always been true. These twin teachers walk side by side, one pointing with philosophy, the other pointing with direct experience, leading you into the same realization that nothing stands alone, and in this interdependence lies both freedom and compassion. When you allow silence to deepen and emptiness to guide you, you begin to live differently. You stop resisting life's flow, stop clinging to the illusion of permanence, stop seeing yourself as separate. You live as part of the great web, steady in stillness, open in compassion, free in awareness. And in this way, the twin teachers do not just instruct, they transform. When silence joins with the teaching of emptiness, you begin to see the world as an unbroken web of interdependence. Nothing stands alone, nothing is fixed, and in that openness, life flows without resistance. This realization does more than reshape your thinking, it shifts the way you move through time itself. In the quiet, you notice a rhythm that is not bound to clocks or deadlines. It is not the hurried pace of ambition or the restless pull of distraction. It is the timeless rhythm of stillness, a current that has always been present beneath the surface noise. To rest in silence is to fall into step with this rhythm, to feel life's eternal flow carrying you instead of always struggling against it. Stillness does not stop time, it changes how you experience it. When the mind is restless, time feels fragmented. Hours slip away unnoticed in distraction, or they drag unbearably when caught in waiting. In silence, these distortions dissolve. Time softens into presence. Each moment feels whole, complete in itself, not a stepping stone to something else. You begin to move in time with life, not chasing it, not resisting it, but flowing alongside it with balance. This rhythm of stillness reveals itself in the body first. Breathing slows, heartbeat steadies, muscles release. The physical body becomes a reflection of inner calm, aligning with the quiet tempo that silence teaches. From there, the mind follows. Thoughts no longer collide with one another in frantic bursts. Instead, they rise and fade with a gentler pace, like waves moving in harmony with the tide. The timeless rhythm is not about absence of thought, but about balance, an alignment between mind, body, and the greater flow of existence. Living in this rhythm changes your relationship with urgency. Modern life glorifies speed, demanding that everything be immediate, from messages to achievements. But when you root yourself in stillness, you see that much of this urgency is artificial. Silence shows you that the universe has never been in a rush. Trees take decades to grow, rivers carve valleys over centuries, stars burn for millions of years. When you align with this natural rhythm, you no longer feel pressured to race. You learn the wisdom of pacing yourself, trusting that life unfolds in its own time. This shift is not passivity but harmony. It does not mean you sit idle and wait for everything to happen. It means that your actions begin to align with timing that feels natural rather than forced. You speak when the moment is ready for words. You act when conditions have ripened. You rest when stillness calls for renewal. This way of living conserves energy and magnifies effectiveness. A single action, done in alignment with the rhythm of stillness, can accomplish more than countless efforts made in haste. Silence also uncovers the hidden beauty of ordinary moments. When you move too quickly, life becomes a blur, a series of tasks completed without depth. In stillness, every moment reveals its richness. A sip of water becomes refreshing in a way you had forgotten. A conversation carries nuance you once overlooked. The rhythm of stillness slows you enough to actually meet your life, not just pass through it. This meeting is what makes moments feel timeless. They are no longer reduced to minutes ticking away, but lived as complete experiences. The timeless rhythm also teaches resilience. When you are disconnected from stillness, you are tossed about by every change, pulled by every demand, shaken by every storm. In silence, you feel the deeper current that runs beneath all of it. Like a river that continues flowing under shifting waves, life's rhythm carries on regardless of surface turbulence. Resting in this awareness gives you steadiness. You no longer panic when storms come because you trust the current beneath them. This awareness also reshapes your sense of identity. Most people define themselves by what they do, how much they accomplish, how quickly they move. But in stillness, you begin to sense another layer of self, the part of you that is not rushing, not striving, but simply being. This deeper self is not bound by the timelines of the world. It is connected to something eternal, something vast, something that does not measure worth in speed or productivity. Aligning with this part of yourself frees you from the exhaustion of always proving. In silence, you also realize that the timeless rhythm is shared. It is not your private refuge, but a universal current. When you sit in stillness, you feel how it connects you to others, to nature, to all existence. You are breathing in the same rhythm that sustains every living being. You are resting in the same quiet that has held generations before you. This sense of shared rhythm dissolves loneliness and replaces it with belonging. You are part of life's great unfolding, moving in harmony with all that is. The rhythm of stillness also teaches trust. Restless minds cling to control, fearing what will happen if they let go. But when you rest in silence, you see how life moves without your constant interference. The breath continues, the heart beats, the earth turns. You realize that you are carried by forces larger than yourself, and this recognition softens the grip of control. Trust replaces tension. Life becomes less about forcing outcomes and more about joining the rhythm already carrying you. Over time, this practice changes how you see challenges. Instead of viewing them as interruptions, you begin to see them as part of the rhythm. Just as music has pauses and dissonance that give depth to the song, life's difficulties add shape and texture to the flow. Silence allows you to face them without breaking rhythm, to move through them without losing balance. The timeless current holds even in moments of chaos, reminding you that no storm defines the whole river. Perhaps the greatest gift of the timeless rhythm is peace. Not the fragile peace that depends on perfect circumstances, but the deep peace that comes from alignment. When you move with the rhythm of stillness, life no longer feels like a struggle against time. It feels like a dance, one where you are guided step by step, breath by breath. Each moment becomes enough, because you are fully in it. And in this way, silence transforms time from something you chase into something you live. This is how silence aligns you with eternity, not by pulling you away from life, but by weaving you back into its natural flow. It shows you that you do not need to hurry, prove, or force your place. You are already part of the rhythm, and when you rest in it, life begins to carry you with a grace that words cannot describe. In stillness, time ceases to be your enemy. It becomes your teacher, your companion, your rhythm. And in that rhythm, you finally feel at home. When silence draws you into the timeless rhythm of stillness, life begins to feel less like a race against the clock and more like a song you are moving with, step by step. You find yourself breathing with the flow of existence, no longer pushing against its current. But as this harmony deepens, a new realization arises. This stillness you touch is not only something you visit, it is something you can build within. Your own being can become a sanctuary, a place as sacred as any temple or shrine. By tending inward with care and devotion, you consecrate yourself as a living space of truth and refuge. Seeing the self as a temple shifts everything. It changes the way you treat your thoughts, your body, your spirit. In most lives, people scatter themselves outward, spending their energy on endless activity while neglecting the one space that will never leave them, their inner world. Silence invites you back to this space, reminding you that the deepest sanctuary is not found in a building or ritual, but in the way you care for your own being. This inner temple is not built of stone, yet it requires structure. Just as a sacred place is maintained with order, cleanliness, and reverence, so too must your mind and heart be cared for. When you practice inward focus, you sweep away the clutter of restless thought, clear out the dust of resentment, polish the surfaces of gratitude and kindness. This is not abstract, it is the daily work of awareness. Every moment you tend to your mind instead of letting it decay in distraction, you strengthen the temple of the self. Treating yourself as a temple does not mean perfection or purity in the rigid sense. It means honoring the space within as something worthy of care. You would not desecrate a sacred hall with careless words or destructive acts. In the same way, you begin to treat your body with respect, your speech with mindfulness, and your thoughts with discipline. Each choice becomes an offering, shaping the atmosphere of your inner temple. This practice also redefines solitude. For many, being alone feels empty, even frightening. But when you cultivate yourself as a temple, solitude becomes rich. You no longer seek constant company to avoid silence, because silence itself becomes sacred. Inwardly, you feel accompanied by presence, supported by the strength of your own stillness. You realize you are never truly alone when you rest in the sanctuary of awareness. The temple of the self is also a place of refuge. Life brings storms, loss, failure, conflict, uncertainty. Most people seek comfort outside, hoping circumstances will provide safety. But external shelters are fragile. They can collapse without warning. The inner temple, however, remains. If you cultivate it, you carry within you a place that no crisis can destroy. When chaos surrounds you, you retreat inward, and there you find peace that is not dependent on conditions. In Buddhism, there is the image of taking refuge not in external idols, but in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. To see yourself as a temple is to extend this principle inward. You take refuge in your capacity for awareness, in the truth you cultivate through silence, and in the community of qualities, compassion, patience, wisdom that live within you. These are not abstract ideals, but living elements of your temple, waiting for you to tend to them. This inner consecration also teaches reverence. Reverence for your body as the vessel through which you practice. Reverence for your mind as the tool that perceives reality. Reverence for your heart as the source of compassion. By treating these with care, you honor life itself. The self becomes not a possession to exploit, but a sacred space to respect. This reverence softens how you live. You eat not just to fill hunger, but to nourish the temple. You rest not out of laziness, but to protect the sacred vessel. You speak not carelessly, but as if your words echo within holy walls. Tending your inner temple also strengthens discipline. Sacred spaces are maintained through daily care, not occasional bursts of attention. In the same way, your mind requires steady practice. Meditation, mindfulness, reflection, these are the offerings that keep your temple alive. Without them, dust gathers, weeds grow, the structure weakens. With them, the temple glows with clarity and resilience. Discipline here is not punishment, but devotion, the devotion of returning again and again to keep your inner space clear. The self as a temple also reframes relationships. When you honor your inner space, you recognize that others carry their own temples within them. You meet them with respect, knowing that each being is a sacred sanctuary shaped by their own struggles and truths. This perspective dissolves judgment and fosters compassion. Instead of trying to invade or control others, you honor their space as you honor your own. There is also profound healing in this practice. Many people carry wounds within the scars of rejection, trauma, or self-neglect. Left untended, these wounds become cracks in the temple. But silence gives you the patience to repair. By sitting with pain instead of fleeing, you patch the broken places with understanding. By offering compassion to yourself, you mend what was once fragile. Slowly, the temple becomes whole again, not because it has never known damage, but because it has been lovingly restored. The inner temple is not meant to be closed off. Just as sacred spaces welcome seekers and offer peace, your temple radiates outward. When you tend to your mind, the calm you cultivate spills into your interactions. When you clean your inner space of anger, others feel safe in your presence. When you adorn your temple with kindness, it shines beyond you, touching lives you may never realize. In this way, self-focus becomes service. The temple of your being becomes a refuge not just for you, but for all who cross your path. Living as a temple also requires humility. It is easy to confuse self-consecration with self-importance, but the two are different. A true temple does not exist to glorify itself. It exists to hold space for truth. When you see yourself as a temple, you remember that your worth is not in ego, but in the qualities you shelter. Humility becomes natural because you realize the temple is not yours alone. It is shaped by all the forces that sustain you: earth, breath, community, wisdom. This way of living reshapes how you see suffering. Instead of seeing pain as a flaw, you begin to see it as part of the sacred work of tending your temple. Cracks let in light, wounds deepen compassion, challenges strengthen the walls of resilience. Every hardship becomes material for building, every difficulty a chance to reinforce the sanctuary within. This transforms suffering into practice, making even the hardest moments part of the consecration. Ultimately, the self as a temple is about alignment. It is aligning your inner world with the values you hold most deeply: truth, compassion, stillness, wisdom. It is shaping your life so that every choice, every breath, honors the sacredness of being alive. It is walking through the world, carrying within you not chaos but sanctuary, not neglect but devotion. And when you live this way, something shifts not only in you, but in those around you. Your presence carries the weight of a temple, quiet, steady, dignified. People feel calmer in your company, more grounded in themselves. You become a reminder that the sacred is not far away, not locked in temples of stone, but alive in every human being willing to tend to their inner space. This is the gift of silence when carried inward. It consecrates your being, turning your life into a living sanctuary. And in this sanctuary, you discover both refuge and responsibility, the refuge of peace no one can take from you, and the responsibility to honor that peace in how you live, how you speak, and how you meet the world. When you begin to treat yourself as a temple, cared for and honored as a sacred space, you discover a strength that feels unshakable. But even within the most carefully tended sanctuary, suffering still arises. Pain, loss, disappointment, and fear do not disappear simply because you've cultivated stillness. They still knock at the door of your heart. Yet the temple you have built gives you a different way to meet them. Instead of collapsing under their weight or drowning in resistance, you learn to sit with suffering in silence. You do not chase it away, and you do not cling to it. You watch. And in that quiet observation, you begin to see something remarkable. Suffering is not permanent, and the moment you stop fighting it, its grip begins to dissolve. Silent observation is not passivity. It is active awareness without interference. Normally, when pain arises, the instinct is to resist. You distract yourself, suppress it, or cover it with noise. Or you do the opposite, cling to it, replaying it in thought, feeding it with stories that make it heavier. Both resistance and attachment strengthen suffering. Silence offers another path. To sit still, breathe, and simply observe is to see pain as it is an experience that comes, shifts, and eventually passes. This practice begins with recognition. You allow yourself to notice the sensations of suffering without judgment. If there is grief, you feel its heaviness in the chest. If there is anger, you notice the heat in the body. If there is fear, you observe the tightening of the breath. You do not label these as good or bad. You witness them as conditions arising. This witnessing creates space. Instead of being consumed by suffering, you stand beside it, watching. The first thing silence reveals is impermanence. No sensation, however sharp, stays the same forever. A wave of grief may feel unbearable, but if you stay still, you notice it changes, intensity rises, then softens, shifts in texture, transforms into something else. Even the heaviest emotions move like clouds across the sky. Without silence, you miss this truth, believing pain will last forever. With silence, you see it directly. Suffering has no permanence. It ebbs and flows like everything else. Silent observation also reveals the difference between pain and the stories around pain. The raw sensation, tightness, heaviness, heat is one thing. The stories, "This will never end," "I cannot survive this," "My life is ruined," are another. In silence, you begin to separate the two. You see that much of suffering comes not from the raw feeling itself, but from the thoughts you attach to it. Observing quietly breaks this fusion. You learn that you can feel pain without drowning in narrative. This distinction lightens the burden immediately. Another gift of silent observation is patience. Most suffering feels unbearable not because of its intensity, but because of the mind's urgency to escape it. You want relief now, but silence teaches you to wait, to sit with discomfort long enough to see its nature. This waiting builds resilience. You discover that you can endure more than you thought, that suffering loses much of its power when you stop running from it. This practice also softens the heart. In silence, you begin to see your suffering not as punishment, but as part of the human condition. Everyone feels pain, loss, fear. You are not singled out, you are not alone. This recognition opens compassion for yourself first, and then for others. You understand suffering as a shared truth, and this dissolves the isolation that often makes pain sharper. Compassion rises naturally from silence, because when you face your own wounds honestly, you become gentler with the wounds of others. Silent observation also dismantles identity around suffering. Without awareness, you might say, "I am broken, I am angry, I am hopeless." With awareness, you begin to see anger is present, sadness is moving through, pain is here. This shift seems small but is transformative. It shows you that you are not your suffering. You are the awareness that notices it. This separation is freedom. It means that no matter how strong the storm, a deeper part of you remains untouched. This understanding brings dignity back to suffering. Instead of collapsing into it or masking it, you meet it with presence. You allow it to be, and by doing so, you see its impermanence. You realize suffering is not an enemy, but a teacher. It teaches patience, compassion, resilience, humility. Silence makes space for these lessons to appear, because in quiet observation, suffering loses its sharp edges and reveals its hidden truths. This practice also prevents suffering from spreading harm. When pain is unobserved, it often leaks into the world through harsh words, reactive actions, cycles of blame. But when you hold suffering in silence, you stop it at the threshold. You do not pass your wounds onto others. You contain them, soften them, transform them within. In this way, silent observation is not only healing for you, but protection for those around you. The practice is not easy. Sitting with suffering requires courage. The mind will resist, urging distraction. The body will fidget, wanting escape. Yet each time you return to silence, you grow stronger. Each time you observe instead of reacting, you deepen your freedom. Over time, suffering begins to feel less threatening. You see it as weather, not identity as passing clouds, not permanent sky. Silent observation of suffering also leads to insight. When you stop reacting automatically, you begin to notice patterns. You see how certain actions, thoughts, or attachments lead to pain. You see how clinging creates frustration, how anger masks fear, how avoidance deepens grief. These insights are not intellectual. They arise naturally when silence allows you to watch suffering with clarity. And once you see the roots, you can begin to live differently, planting seeds of peace instead of cycles of pain. Ultimately, silence reveals that suffering, like all things, is impermanent and empty of fixed self. It is not you. It is not forever. It is a wave passing through the ocean of your being. By observing quietly, you no longer drown in it. You float, you breathe, you endure, and eventually you watch it fade. This fading is not forced. It is the natural law of impermanence. Silence simply allows you to witness it, and in that witnessing, suffering loses its grip. What once felt unbearable becomes manageable. What once felt eternal is revealed as temporary. What once defined you becomes just another experience passing through awareness. This is the freedom silence offers, not the absence of suffering, but the power to see through it, to meet it with dignity, and to let it dissolve in its own time. When you learn to sit silently with suffering, to watch it rise and fall without clinging or pushing it away, something extraordinary happens. You realize that your presence alone, calm, steady, unshaken, changes not only your relationship to pain but also the energy around you. The stillness you cultivate within does not remain contained. It radiates outward in ways too subtle to measure, but powerful enough to transform. Without speaking, without forcing, without interfering, your silence recalibrates the field you live in. This is where the path deepens, shifting from what is seen and spoken to what is unseen and quietly felt. Subtle energy is rarely acknowledged in modern life, yet it is always present. Walk into a room after an argument, and you feel the tension without anyone explaining. Sit with a person at peace, and your own breathing slows. These shifts are not visible, yet they are undeniable. Buddhism teaches that everything is interconnected, and silence allows you to feel that interconnection not as an idea, but as direct experience. When you turn inward and rest in stillness, you become attuned to these currents, and your attention itself begins to reshape them. The first place this shift is felt is within relationships. Most conflicts are fueled not only by words, but by the restless energy beneath them, defensiveness, irritation, fear. When you cultivate inner silence, you no longer feed that current. You may not even speak differently, but the space you hold changes everything. A partner feels less attacked. A friend feels more heard. A colleague feels more respected. You have done nothing outwardly except remain anchored, yet the unseen shift in your energy changes the whole interaction. This does not mean you suppress emotion. It means you allow silence to process it before it spills outward. Instead of reacting from agitation, you respond from calm. Instead of transmitting fear, you offer steadiness. Over time, this becomes your natural way of being. Others sense it, and without you instructing them, they begin to settle in your presence. You recalibrate relationships not by controlling them, but by adjusting the energy you bring into them. This subtle influence also extends into work. A mind that is scattered carries chaos into every task. A mind that is silent carries clarity. Without needing to push harder, your decisions sharpen, your priorities align, your creativity flows more freely. You may notice that projects begin to unfold with greater ease, that colleagues respond with less resistance, that opportunities arise more smoothly. This is not luck, it is the unseen effect of your inner stillness aligning the energy around your actions. One of the most profound aspects of focusing on the unseen is realizing that silence speaks louder than effort. Many people believe change must come through force, through constant correction of others, through endless talking. Yet silence shows that transformation often happens in subtler ways. Your quiet patience can soften someone's anger more than your arguments. Your steady calm can hold a group together when words would only scatter it. Energy, not volume, is what shapes outcomes. Attention to inner silence also reshapes decision-making. Normally, choices are clouded by noise, fear of failure, desire for approval, pressure from expectations. But when you pause in silence, you begin to sense a deeper current guiding you. Sometimes it comes as intuition, sometimes as a quiet clarity that one path feels aligned while another feels heavy. By listening to these subtle signals, you make choices that not only serve your needs, but harmonize with the greater flow of life. This alignment often leads to better outcomes with less struggle. This practice also refines your perception. In silence, you notice what is often overlooked: the hesitation in someone's voice, the tension in a room, the shift in your own body when a thought arises. These subtle cues are invisible to the distracted mind, but clear to the silent one. And once you notice them, you can respond with wisdom. You may hold back when words would wound, or step forward when presence is needed. This attentiveness makes your actions more skillful, not because you try harder, but because you see more clearly. Focusing on the unseen also cultivates humility. It reminds you that influence does not come only from what is visible. You realize you do not always need recognition or proof that your silence is shaping things. The subtle shifts may never be noticed by others, but they ripple outward nonetheless. Humility grows because you no longer act for validation. You act because you know silence itself is enough. In relationships, this humility protects love from control. Instead of forcing others to change, you focus on maintaining your own clarity. That clarity naturally influences them without coercion. A parent who responds with calm rather than anger teaches a child patience without lecture. A leader who holds silence before deciding teaches a team the value of reflection without instruction. These are shifts in energy, not commands, yet they often transform more deeply than any direct order. This unseen work also lightens your burden. When you realize you do not need to control everything outwardly, you free yourself from endless struggle. You discover that maintaining your own stillness is enough to influence the whole. This does not mean ignoring responsibility, but it means carrying it differently with trust rather than tension. Life becomes less about forcing outcomes and more about holding the space where outcomes can align naturally. Another layer of this practice is self-healing. By focusing on silence within, you begin to notice subtle shifts in your own energy. A tightness that signals stress, a heaviness that warns of burnout, a restlessness that points to unspoken fear. By noticing these early, you adjust before they grow. You rest, breathe, release, and in doing so, you prevent suffering before it takes hold. This preventative care is one of the greatest gifts of attending to the unseen. Over time, you may notice that silence recalibrates more than your immediate surroundings. It reshapes how life itself unfolds. Synchronistic moments appear in encounters, opportunities, solutions that seem to arise without effort. This is not magic, but resonance. When your inner silence aligns with the natural order, life responds in kind. The unseen rhythm you cultivate within attracts alignment in the outer world. Ultimately, focusing on the unseen through silence teaches you that true change rarely comes from noise. It comes from the energy you carry into each moment. You may say little, do less, yet affect more than endless action ever could. Relationships soften, work flows, decisions clarify not because you forced them, but because you aligned yourself inwardly first. This is the quiet power of silence as unseen influence. It is the recognition that life is shaped not only by words and deeds, but by the subtle energy beneath them. And when you tend to that energy with awareness, you discover that the world around you begins to change, not through interference, but through the steady recalibration of your own inner stillness. When you begin to sense the subtle power of silence shaping relationships, work, and even the rhythm of your own decisions, you realize something profound. Not every truth requires words. Influence is often carried in presence, not explanation. This recognition leads to one of the most liberating practices of all the wisdom of not explaining yourself. In a world obsessed with constant justification, where people rush to defend every choice and prove every intention, silence becomes a radical act. Choosing not to explain does not mean weakness or evasion. It means conserving your energy, preserving your dignity, and trusting that truth does not need constant defense. Explanations are often less about clarity and more about fear. You explain yourself to avoid judgment, to soften criticism, to make others comfortable with your path. Yet in doing so, you give away your power. You tie your peace to whether or not others approve of your reasoning. Silence breaks this chain. When you stop justifying yourself unnecessarily, you reclaim your strength. You no longer live as a performer seeking applause. You live as someone rooted in their own clarity. Silence in the face of expectation is uncomfortable at first. People often demand explanations as a way to control, to measure, or to pull you into their narratives. To say little or nothing requires courage, but that courage creates a shift. You begin to realize that not every decision needs to be explained, not every feeling needs to be defended, not every action needs to be justified. Some truths are lived, not spoken. Some dignity is preserved precisely in restraint. This does not mean dishonesty or avoidance. It means discernment. There are times when explaining is necessary, when it prevents harm, clarifies misunderstanding, or builds trust. But much of the explaining people do daily is unnecessary, draining energy without adding value. By practicing silence in these moments, you conserve your inner resources. That conservation allows you to direct your energy where it truly matters, toward growth, compassion, and presence. Not explaining yourself also reveals the power of boundaries. It communicates without words. I do not owe you my inner world. This is not cruelty, but clarity. Your thoughts, feelings, and decisions are sacred. Sharing them is a choice, not an obligation. When you stop rushing to explain, you begin to notice who respects your silence and who resists it. This teaches you about the nature of your relationships. The ones who honor your quiet are those who honor you. Choosing not to explain also deepens your relationship with trust. You trust yourself enough to stand by your decisions without external validation. You trust others enough to allow them their own perceptions, even if they misunderstand you. You trust life enough to let it unfold without controlling how everyone sees your role in it. This trust frees you from the exhausting task of constant self-defense. The practice also strengthens presence. Explanations often pull you into the past or the future, rehashing what was done, predicting how it will be received. Silence roots you in the present. You stand here, steady, not trying to rewrite the story. This steadiness is felt by others as dignity. It is the quiet strength of someone who does not need to argue their worth, because it radiates without words. Not explaining yourself is also an act of compassion toward your own mind. Each time you defend or justify, you feed the restless cycle of thought, rehearsing reasons, anticipating reactions. Silence interrupts this cycle. It gives the mind a chance to rest. Over time, you realize how much lighter life feels when you are not constantly entangled in explanations. This lightness is freedom, the freedom of living without needing to convince. This practice also prevents entanglement in unnecessary conflict. Many arguments grow not from actions themselves, but from the justifications around them. When you choose silence instead of defense, the cycle stops. The tension dissipates because there is nothing to push against. Your quiet becomes a shield, protecting both your peace and the relationship. Perhaps the most profound gift of not explaining yourself is self-respect. Each time you choose silence over unnecessary justification, you affirm that your worth is not up for debate. You treat your inner world as sacred, not something to be picked apart by every opinion. This quiet affirmation builds a deeper sense of dignity, one that no criticism can diminish and no praise can inflate. Over time, this wisdom reshapes your life. You stop oversharing with those who have not earned your trust. You stop defending choices that need no defense. You stop giving energy to conversations that only drain. Instead, you hold your silence as a form of power. Your words, when spoken, carry more weight because they are not diluted by constant justification. Your presence speaks louder than explanation ever could. This is the quiet strength of choosing not to explain. It is not stubbornness nor pride, but wisdom. It is knowing when silence says more than words, when dignity is preserved by restraint, and when energy is better spent on living your truth than defending it. And in that restraint, you discover a deeper freedom, the freedom of no longer needing to be understood by everyone because you understand yourself. When you walk through the path of silence, a pattern begins to emerge. It starts with non-resistance, dissolving conflict without struggle. It deepens into listening, hearing not only your thoughts but the truth beneath them. It unfolds into ego softening, into understanding karma, into presence that transforms anxiety into stillness. Silence shapes your words, teaches restraint, and reveals that self-focus is not selfish but compassionate. It shows you that quiet is rebellion in a world of noise, that doing nothing can align you with synchronicity, that space itself allows life to reorder. It helps you balance self-care without falling into ego, hear the dharma in pauses, practice detachment as love, and feel your own breath as the living sound of silence. Through silence, you rise like the lotus, untouched by the mud, unshaken by arguments, guided by the twin teachers of stillness and emptiness. You move into rhythm with life's eternal flow. Treat yourself as a temple, watch suffering dissolve in observation, sense the unseen shifts of energy, preserve your dignity by not explaining yourself, and realize that all along, silence was never emptiness. It was the ground of truth, compassion, and freedom. This is the hidden treasure Buddhism points toward. When you stop scattering your energy outward and turn inward with quiet focus, everything begins to fall into place. Not by force, not by noise, but by the natural order that silence allows. Now I'd love to hear from you what part of this journey through silence spoke to you the most. Was it the power of non-resistance, the courage of walking away from arguments, or the quiet strength of not explaining yourself? Share your reflections in the comments. I read them all. And if this teaching resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell so you can continue walking this path with us. More wisdom, more clarity, and more peace are waiting.